Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, officers and members of the public. For the purpose of the recording, I'll introduce everybody. My name's Councillor White, John White, and I'm the chairman. The other councillors taking part, and I'll introduce them separately and ask them just to confirm that they're present. If we could, yes. Can you ask? Hopefully that will be a bit better. He's winding it up. Can you? Oh. Secret box behind me. I didn't realise that. Right, I'm going to introduce the councillors, starting with Councillor Alexander. And Councillor Baker.
Good evening, Chairman.
Councillor Codling.
Good evening, Chairman.
Councillor Guglielmi.
Good evening, Chairman.
Councillor Harris.
Evening, Chairman.
Councillor Placey.
Evening, Chair.
And tonight, Councillor Scott.
Hello, Chairman. First time in 12 years since I've been on planning, so welcome. Thank you very much.
And it does give me a chance to introduce my Vice Chairman, Councillor Fowler.
Good evening, Chairman.
The TDC officers assisting us tonight are the Director of Planning, the Planning Manager, and it should be the Planning Solicitor, who is not with me at this instant, but I'm hoping she will join me very shortly. Planning officers and the committee staff. And right at this stage, I give notice that tonight I'm going to modify the order in which I take the applications on the agenda. I am going to start with items 8 and 9, and then we'll do 5, 6 and 7. As they are listed on the agenda. The reason being that 5, 6 and 7 are all TDC applications, and I don't expect any public speakings for that one, where there will be possibly for 8 and 9. As usual, public speaking will be, I shall ask the officer to introduce the application, to show any photos or videos of the site. I will then ask the applicant or his agent to speak. This will then be followed by members of the public who've asked to speak either for or against the application, and then any speakers for the town or the parish council, and finally the ward councillor. Councillors will then question the officer. And once they've done that, we go into the general debate, and I shall, as usual, ask for proposer and seconder, and we will vote on it, as usual. Should any member of the public like to follow this meeting, it can be found on the internet by logging on to www.tenderingdc.gov.uk/live meeting. I'm just going to ask the officer if he can confirm that we are going out live, but he's just disappeared, and I'm working on the assumption, as it appears on the screen, that we are now going out live. And of course, as usual, not only is this meeting going out live, it will be recorded by the council and will be available on our website. So if we turn to item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. There is only one, Councillor Wiggins, for whom Councillor Scott is deputising. Item 2, we have the minutes of the meeting of the 25th of October, and I haven't received any notification that there are errors or omissions in them. So can I sign them. Thank you very much. I've got nodding from all my committee. Thank you. Then we move to item 3, declarations of interest, either pecuniary or personal. And as I see my Vice Chairman's hand gone up, I'll take her first and then the other councillors.
Thank you, Chairman. It will be the first item, which is item A4, the application for Kirby de Sokens as 21/02181/4. I have received emails from the agent acting on behalf of the applicant, lobbying emails, which have been forwarded to planning officers. Thank you, Chairman.
I think that's probably the case of all of us. I think I'm getting nodding. Yes, it is noted. Thank you for that. Councillor Baker.
Chairman, obviously, with regard to the first application, it's already been said, but I received several emails and also in the last 2 weeks lobbying correspondence to my personal address. However, I'm not predetermined. In relation to the applications 22/01675, 1676 and 1666, which are across the district and are for the Changing Places toilets. When the government announced funding for these facilities, I pushed for officers to apply for funding, and when notified it was successful and successfully awarded, I was very vocal locally and in email exchanges that areas in my ward, Eastcliff and in Holland-on-Sea, would be suitable for such facilities. I had no involvement in the decision as to where they were to be sited. That was an officer decision. And although I do not consider myself predetermined in any way, it could be seen that I am biased towards those applications, and as such I will not take part in the debate or deliberation of all 3. I will, however, speak on the applications relating to my ward and Holland-on-Sea. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to confirm, yes, I received lobbying material via email and also hard copy. I didn't read it. I have given it to officers. That's appertaining to the solar farm, I beg your pardon. And also I'd like to just to confirm item 9, application 22/01232/FUL at Gutteridge Hall Lane. I am the ward councillor for Wheelie and Tendring, but I'd just like to confirm that I will take part in the debate and I'm not predetermined in any way. Thank you.
No? Right, in which case we can go on to item 4, and under item 4 I've received a question from Councillor Baker under the Council Procedure 38. So I'm going to ask the councillor, so that everybody knows what we're talking about, if Councillor Baker would read his question, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As the Chairman of the Planning Committee has a standing invitation to attend meetings of the Planning Policy and Local Plan Committee and to express the Planning Committee's views and comments on any report items that are being considered by the Planning Policy and Local Plan Committee under Council Procedure Rule 36.1, would the Chairman agree that this Planning Committee has not previously discussed or made any comments about any upcoming items on the agendas of the Planning Policy and Local Plan Committee, and that in future this should be included as an item on the Planning Committee's monthly agenda in order that any views from members of the Planning Committee on upcoming items on the agendas of the Planning Policy and Local Plan Committee can be discussed, debated, and a collective view, if any, be presented by the Planning Committee Chairman on behalf of this committee.
Thank you very much, Councillor Baker, for the question as well. Councillor Turner, the Chairman of the Planning Policy and Local Plan Committee, kindly introduced the opportunity for myself as Chairman of the Planning Committee to comment on behalf of our committee on matters relating to planning policy on its agenda. Councillor Turner has been keen to ensure the opportunity for input from ourselves as the committee charged with implementing such policies that they may have drawn up, that specifically when it comes to determining planning applications. And we welcome that. I do acknowledge Councillor Baker's suggestion and completely understand the reason for it. However, I am reluctant to agree to the inclusion of a standing item on the monthly planning committee agenda to discuss forthcoming business for the Planning Policy and Local Plan Committee, especially as it would be taken in public. Firstly, we run the risk of duplicating the work of the Planning Policy and Local Plan Committee if we start having potentially lengthy discussions on matters over which Councillor Turner and his committee has jurisdiction. Secondly, I believe this committee's time at these meetings is best served firmly focusing on the determination of planning applications and other matters for which this committee has the responsibility. As we know, the agendas for our meetings can, on occasion, be very long, and the applications we consider often carry with them significant public interest and a huge investment in time and effort, both from the applicants, their agents, and indeed our officers. I would not want to run the risk of curtailing the length or the quality of debate on planning applications to make time for discussion on matters that are the responsibility of another committee. However, instead, I would suggest that we ask our Director of Planning, Mr. Guyver, to advise us of the publication of reports of the Planning Policy and Local Plan Committee and invite comments by way of an email which will be coordinated by Mr. Guyver and therefore get reported to the right committee by way of an update sheet. I hope that goes part way to answering Councillor Baker's point. Thank you very much. We will now move then to application agenda item 8, which is A4, which is the planning application 21/02181 This is land adjacent to Halstead Road, Kirby Lissoken, and I believe Mr. Lang is taking this one for us. So over to you, Mr. Lang.
Thank you, Chairman. Evening, councillors. Before I start, I'll just draw attention to members of the update sheet, which includes some additional representations that were received today and over the last week or so. There's a couple of additional objections there, and there's some further support letters as well. So I'll allow members to view those as we go along. So the applications for the construction of a solar farm with associated works, equipment and necessary infrastructure, and an associated eco hub, which comprises of an electric vehicle charging station, an area of parking, access, storage batteries and various associated equipment. So the application sites straddle both sides of Halstead Road. On the eastern side is the larger parcel of land which accommodates the solar farm. That's approximately 22 hectares in size. The smaller parcel's about 1 hectare, and that will accommodate the eco hub. To the north of the solar farm is the built-up area of Kirby Lissoken. To the south is Kirby Cross. There's a blank area where the Linden Homes housing development is currently under construction. Between the two parcels of land are various residential properties. There's a Grade 2 listed property in that location as well. To the west of the smaller parcel is Kirby Playing Fields, and there's various public rights of ways that run across the site and adjacent to the parcels of land, which I'll show you shortly. So this shows the current local plan designation in respect of the two sites. As you can see, the solar farm is located wholly within the strategic Green Gap, and the Eco Hub site is located outside the Green Gap. In terms of both parcels of land, they're both outside the settlement boundaries of Kirkby Le Soken and Kirkby Cross. As you can see, that blank white space at the bottom is within the settlement boundary, and that's the Linden Home scheme. You can see Kirkby Planfields to the west is outlined in green as well. You can see various public rights of way that run to the north, to the west of the Eco Hub site, and across the solar farm site from north to south, linking Kirkby Le Soken and Kirkby Cross. This is an aerial view of the two parcels of land. I've superimposed the Linden Homes development so you can see there where that is in relation to the solar farm site. In terms of both parcels of land, they've both been in agricultural use. The solar farm site is currently in agricultural use. The Eco Hub site, the smaller parcel, is currently fallow, and I believe that's been fallow for a number of years. It's an aerial view of the listed building, as I said, between the two parcels of land. As you can see, it's well screened by existing trees. It's well landscaped. So in terms of intervisibility between the developments and that particular property, they're fairly limited. This is a view looking southwest from Turpins Lane. As you can see, this will be where the eastern section of the solar farm will be located. You can see in the distance there's various mature trees and hedgerows which will be maintained as part of the scheme. And beyond is the development of Kirkby Cross. This is a view looking west across the solar farm site. So this is from the public right of way that runs north to south through the development. You can see housing on Housestead Road in the distance, and as you can see, the public right of way is where we are located. There's mature trees and hedgerows that will be retained as part of the development and strengthened in places. The same location looking northwest, so you can see the backs of the properties in Dugmore Avenue, which make up Kirkby Le Soken. The view looking east across the solar farm, this is from the public right of way. So you can see there's the backs of the properties on Dugmore Avenue on the left-hand side of the photo. And you can see the land sloped slightly down towards the west. And this is looking south across the solar farm with Kirkby Le Soken behind us. And again, you can see the various field margins and boundary hedgerows that will be retained. This is looking west from the same footpath. You can see the properties on Housestead Road in the distance, and you can see the trees that surround the listed building on the left-hand side there. This is a view of the photo of the access into the Housestead Road solar farm site. So there's currently a gated access for use by the farmer. This will be widened, opened up for the solar farm in terms of construction, and then when it's operational, that will be used. The hedgerow in this location will be relocated back behind the required visibility displays. Looking north across the solar farm from the southern end, with Kirkby Cross behind us, so you can see distance views of Hamford Water in the distance. And this is looking east at the southern end again, so you can see the properties in Village Way on the right-hand side there in Kirkby Cross. So this is the Eco Hub site. So this is in the top corner. So this is looking southwest, and you can see that it's been laid to fallow. There's boundary hedgerows at the rear, and then the Kirkby Planfields beyond. You've got overhead wires which will provide the grid connection for the solar farm and the Eco Hub itself. Just looking south along Housestead Road, so this will be the frontage to the Eco Hub. And again, there'll be an access further along, and there'll be a slight removal of hedgerow there to maintain visibility displays. And this is looking west along the public right of way that runs along the northern boundary of the Eco Hub. So this provides access to the Planfields, and there's a couple of dwellings that are served by this access as well. This is the proposed site layout. You can see the solar farm is on the eastern side there. 30-metre buffers have been retained to the residential, the rear boundaries of those residential properties, both at Kirkby Le Soken and Kirkby Cross. The public footpaths will be maintained, they'll be opened up. You can see in purple outlined is the extent of the Linden Home scheme. In terms of the solar farm itself, it will be approximately 26 megawatts in terms of generation of power. That's the equivalent of between 6,300 and 6,500 homes that will power. This is the Eco Hub in a bit more detail. There's 12 rapid and ultra rapid charging points underneath translucent canopies. To the south of that is a small hub cafe area, and then you've got a picnic area and play area for the dwell time while the vehicles are charging. The northern end, you've got parking spaces, 25 spaces to alleviate parking congestion in terms of the playing fields and for school drop-off or promotion of school drop-off pickup. And then you've got 19 spaces and 3 disabled spaces as well, with 13 fast charging points in that location. You also got the battery storage element at the northern end, and that will provide battery or electricity will be stored from the solar farm and then applied to the actual national grid, and also balanced off with the to provide power to the chargers. Along the northern boundary, there will be a strong buffer of landscaping and mature planting installed. So these are the Eco Hub elevations. In terms of the finishes, there's a timber finish with solar roof. There's acoustic fencing along the northern boundary, and you can see at the floor plan at the top there's a small cafe shop that's 180 meters, 180 square meters in terms of its floor space, which is considered ancillary. There's also bike charging facilities and restrooms in that location as well. This shows the acoustic fencing details that will surround or enclose the electrical compound and also provide attenuation for the residents directly to the north. That will be 3 meters in height and designed to acoustic specification. These are the storage containers and various electrical equipment that will be located within the compound. So in terms of the solar farm, you can see at the top there, the section A, this shows the buffer zone between the rear boundaries of the properties in Dugmore Avenue and then the actual solar farm or the solar panels themselves and the security fencing. So there'll be 22 metres between the rear boundaries, the start of the fencing, and another 8 metres to the actual panels themselves. And then you've got landscaping buffer in there and permissive footpaths being installed as well. In terms of the public rights of way, where there's panels on either side, there'll be a 10-metre buffer with landscaping and fencing in that location. And then where there's only one side of panels in terms of public rights of way, there'll be that 5-metre buffer. And that's been agreed with Essex County Council's public right of way team. Throughout the solar farm, there'll be electrical kiosks and switchgear buildings that will be conditioned to consist of a dark green material so they assimilate within their surroundings. Panel designs, there'll be up to 60-metre stretches, 2.5 metres above ground level, and angled to maintain or achieve maximum solar gain. So this will be the fencing that surrounds the actual solar farm. So it's deer stock fencing, so it's fairly sympathetic. It'll be 2 metres high. Along that fencing, there'll be CCTV cameras facing inwards that will be motion sensitive. And there'll be no lighting at all in terms of the solar farm, so there's no concerns in respect of light pollution. In terms of the landscape strategy, as I said, the Eco Hub will have a strong landscape buffer planted along the northern boundary to provide screening. There'll be acoustic fencing, so what they're proposing will be instant beach hedgerow to provide a quick established buffer or softening of that acoustic fencing in that location. There'll be further strengthening of the hedgerows along the actual perimeters of the site as well. In terms of the solar farm, the northern section, there will be a lot more tree planting. There'll be hedgerow planting being installed. You can see the red dashed line is the existing footpath, and there'll be the introduction of permissive footpaths. So you can see the green dashed line along the northern boundary there. And there'll be orchard trees, Scots pine, oak, willow trees planted along the boundary as well to enhance those walkways through. There'll also be defensive hedgerow species on either side of the public right of way. The southern and eastern section, again, there'll be a permissive footpath that loops back round to give residents additional walking opportunities. There'll be a biodiversity enhancement area, which includes high vernacular and log piles in the centre there, and that'll be fenced off. And again, you can see there'll be the existing footpath will be maintained from north to south. In terms of this shows the hedgerow plan, you can see there'll be in red, there'll be small sections of hedgerow removed to provide access and visibility displays. And you can see the areas in blue is where, or purpley is where the hedgerows will be trimmed back to provide visibility. In terms of the green areas, that's where additional hedgerow is going to be planted. So there's approximately 2,500 metres of hedgerow being installed. So in terms of agricultural land classification, which is a key consideration, in terms of best and most versatile agricultural land, that's classed as grade 1 to 3A. You can see the solar farm site, the majority of that site is 3B, so it falls below the best and most versatile agricultural land. In terms of the solar hub, that's 3A, so that is in that best and most versatile agricultural land category. But given the small nature of that parcel of land, it's not considered to be conducive to modern farming practices. This is the drainage plan. A number of concerns from local residents have been provided in terms of surface water drainage concerns running northwards. In this respect, the actual solar panels won't increase any runoff. It will still infiltrate into the ground at the current greenfield rate. But in terms of betterment, the developers are proposing swales at key points within the site to collect water to ensure that there wouldn't be any surface water drainage. There will actually be betterment in that respect. In terms of the Eco Hub, that will mainly comprise of permeable surfaces, and that will collect water and direct them into infiltration basins along the northern boundary, and foul drainage will connect to the main sewer in Housestead Road. And the Lead Local Flood Authority are satisfied with the proposals. The access to the Eco Hub will be at the southern end of that parcel of land. There'll be a 6.5 metre wide boundary, access going in there. Visibility displays will be provided to accord with the 30-mile-hour speed limit, and highways are satisfied with those requirements and what's been shown. And the access to Housestead Road is 7.5 metres wide, and that's been designed to cater for construction traffic and also the operational traffic once the solar farm is up and running. That's afforded 70 or 90 metre visibility displays in both directions. So in terms of the merits of the scheme, the technical matters, Highways have got no objections, subject to conditions, and the legal obligation pertaining to weighting restrictions. They're satisfied with the access specifications and the visibility displays that have been shown, and they agree with the findings of the applicant's transport assessment, which looks at the anticipated trip generation for the Eco Hub, and that concludes there'll be 54 two-way vehicle movements per hour based on the quantum and average charge time of the proposed electric vehicle charging points. And that was looked at in terms of a worst case scenario in respect of those 54 vehicle movements would be in terms of new traffic rather than just passing by people that wish to use the charging point. So Highways are happy that's a robust approach in this case. As I said, the Lead Local Flood Authority are satisfied with the drainage proposals. In terms of residential amenities, the 30-metre buffer zone to the rear boundaries of the neighbouring properties is considered to be sufficient. That wouldn't affect neighbours' outlook. And there's no impact in terms of noise. A noise assessment was provided, and there's that actually suggested the acoustic fencing will provide suitable attenuation in that respect. And the glint and glare from the panels is considered to be wouldn't cause any adverse impacts. Ecology have reviewed the proposals, and they're happy that the development wouldn't have any adverse impacts on protected species or priority species and habitats, and they've suggested a number of conditions. And again, there's a strong level of biodiversity gain in respect to this application. So in terms of the overall planning balance, there is harm. The solar farm will be, and the Eco Hub to a certain extent, will be located in open countryside within the strategic green gap. However, the landscape harm is considered to be relatively local. It's contained mainly to the public right-of-way which crosses or passes alongside the sites, and in limited views from Housestead Road there will be an impact. And the same can be said of the Eco Hub element, because there will be the introduction of a commercial use within a largely semi-rural location. However, the landscape impact is considered to be of moderate harm. The softening proposed by the landscaping scheme and strategy will help to soften the impact, but there will be an experience or a change of experience for users of the public right-of-way and in views from nearer the site. But wider strategic views, the landscape will be largely limited. Heritage harm at the lower end of the less than substantial scale has also been identified. Given that, as I showed you, the significant screening around that property, the intervisibility wouldn't be sufficient to warrant a high level of harm in that location. In terms of the strategic green gap, the installation of the solar panels would physically prevent any reduction in the current distances between properties comprising both settlements, and represent a relatively low scale and relatively non-intrusive feature. Both settlements would maintain their separate identities, which is the key aspiration of the Strategic Green Gap policy. And once the 40-year time span of the application expires, the land will be returned to its former agricultural use and all landscaping retained. In terms of the benefits in respect to biodiversity, as I said, there's net gain in terms of biodiversity and planting, and that adds moderate weight in favour. The economic benefits during construction and during the installation's operation are moderate again. There's provision of jobs, creation of community benefits fund, additional parking provision for users of the nearby school and adjacent recreation land to alleviate congestion concerns along Halstead Road. And then there's the renewable energy benefits, which policy PPL 10 advocates for proposals for new renewable energy developments in the district. In this respect, the energy generated by the proposed development will contribute to supporting growth in the region and the carbon emissions saved as a result of generating electricity from a renewable source. And this would help tackle climate change and minimise resource use. Significant weight is given to these considerable benefits. And in terms of the EV hub, this will meet future charging demand and encourage the uptake of EVs, as well as addressing concerns regarding local charge point availability, reliability and ease of use. So significant weight is also given to these benefits. So consequently, in terms of the planning balance, the principle of the development is supported at national level in policy and legal commitments to achieve a reduction in carbon emissions. And therefore, the generation of renewable energy and the provision of EV charging infrastructure are significant considerations which weigh substantially in the application's favour. And therefore, ultimately, and on balance, the weight given to the significant benefits outweigh the moderate harm identified to the landscape and the less than substantial harm to the heritage assets. And the application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions and the legal obligation outlined in the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Go into public speaking now. The first person is the applicant, Mr. Matt Partridge, who is sitting there. If you'd like to use that microphone, Mr. Partridge, and you'll see there's on-off switch. Once you've got your microphone alive, then you have 3 minutes, sir.
Hello, is that working? Yes. Good evening, Chairman, Committee. The £15 million Halstead Road Eco Hub would provide modern electric vehicle charging using on-site solar panels. They would generate enough electricity each year for around 6,500 typical homes, or a journey of 74 million miles in a typical electric car. Powerful batteries would store surplus electricity from the solar farm and help to manage the local electricity grid through the on-site grid connection to an overhead existing power line. Just like the rollout of broadband, the electric vehicle charging market misses out many smaller towns and rural areas. This project brings important investment to rural Kirkby, helping the local community switch to electric vehicles as the ban on the sale of new petrol and diesel cars approaches in 2030. Recent government figures show an 82% increase in the number of electric cars in tendering. The Eco Hub would bring wide-ranging benefits: clean energy from the solar panels, saving over 9,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide each year, equivalent to over 5,000 return flights from London to New York. Habitat enhancement plans virtually doubling the biodiversity within the application site, with a community orchard, wildflower planting, and over a mile of new species-rich hedgerow. Around 1,000 metres of new permitted footpaths while maintaining existing rights-of-way. Reduce congestion on Halstead Road at school pick-up and drop-off times through a partnership with the primary school, providing a park and stride scheme where parents of the school can drop their children at the Eco Hub, with the children escorted to the school in groups safely. And continued farming on the majority of the site, with sheep grazing among the solar panels, working with a local shepherd. Highway impacts have been carefully considered, involving a desktop study, a site visit, a safety audit and technical reports. Even based on a worst case, assuming continuous use of all 25 chargers, the Eco Hub would add only one car every 2 minutes to Halstead Road's traffic flow, and there is no objection on highways grounds. Your officers conclude the application is compliant with the relevant local plan policies, including PPL 6 and PPL 10, and there are no statutory objections. Putin's abhorrent war in Ukraine and rising energy prices across the world are not a reason to go slow on climate change. They are a reason to act faster, because diversifying our energy supplies by investing in renewables is precisely the way to ensure ourselves against the risks of energy dependency. They're not my words, but those of the Prime Minister when he addressed the COP27 climate change conference earlier this month. I hope that the committee will back its officers' recommendation and approve this important and timely project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, we have a member of the public speaking against the application, Mr. Roger Parker. Ah, yes, I did. Wasn't sure he was here. Welcome, Mr. Parker. Come forward to the microphone, and once you've got it switched on, you also have 3 minutes. Put the microphone on if you would. That's the one.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of the community regarding the recent application by Naturalis for solar panels. May I begin by saying, right product, wrong place. We in Kirkby are still suffering from the ongoing traffic light problems, which have resulted in a serious mistrust of planning procedures generally. As a result, the application for solar panels, charging station, along with a retail shop and refreshment facilities is naturally treated with a degree of suspicion. Returning to the right product,
Just noticed your microphone went off, sorry. That's it.
I'll start that one again. We in Kirkby are still suffering from the ongoing traffic light problems, which have resulted in a serious mistrust of planning procedures generally. As a result, the application for solar panels, a charging station, along with a retail shop and refreshment facilities is treated naturally with a degree of suspicion. Returning to the right product, I fully support solar power, which we have discreetly at our garden centre and production nurseries. However, this new scheme is in the wrong place for the following reasons. Firstly, and most important, is the loss of the strategic green gap, an integral part of the Council's planning policy throughout tendering. It is understood that on termination of the solar farm, the green gap would revert to brown land and be available for housing. The footpaths will be retained, but fenced either side, including CCTV cameras, thus becoming sterile corridors. Gone will be the open vistas across fields to St Michael's Church, the SSI site of Hampford Water, and farmland beyond. Properties in Dugmore Avenue, Hillcrest, Village Way, Village Close, Buckfast Avenue, Edith Road, Victoria Road, Chartfield Drive, and the listed Hill House, and properties adjacent to the playing fields will all have a drop in the value of their properties. There will be an obvious increase in Halstead Road traffic, becoming even more of a nightmare for mothers with young children and for those walking to school on narrow footpaths. The site will have a 10-foot high boundary fence with inward-facing cameras, giving a prison-like atmosphere. Any newly planted trees and shrubs will take many years to mature, provided they have had sufficient care and attention. The loss of up to 60 acres of agricultural land, which would be capable of producing approximately 300 tonnes of wheat or other crops, will be tragic. Existing fuel outlets up and down the country will not shut up shop and go home, but will adapt and change to electric charging, as will larger retailers. There will be no shortage of charging stations in the future. The list goes on and on. Finally, a while back, the farming side of my family were approached by Naturalis, the solar company, in an endeavour to obtain a similar agreement to the one we have before us now. We had an extremely attractive offer for approximately 80 acres of land further to the west of Halstead Road. However, after much deliberation, the overriding factor was the same as now. It would totally spoil the village and surrounding area, and the proposal was therefore rejected. I finish by repeating, right product, wrong place. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I'm just watching that screen. There's something big. There we are. It's cleared now, so we're back to transmission. Right, now we call on Councillor Nick Turner, representing Frinton and Walton Council. Councillor Turner is well aware of our procedures, and so I'm sure he will be delivering it with, possibly I'll have a bit tolerance, but we'll see where we go. Right.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good evening, fellow members, officers. I have pleasure to be speaking on behalf of the Town Council of Frinton and Walton, who recommended refusal that it is not the right location for this development. You have 3 questions to ask and decide upon tonight. Principle of development, need, planning gain. Kirby Le Soken is an ancient settlement defined as a smaller rural settlement. Kirby Cross is a much newer and is classified as a small urban settlement. Policy SPL2, formerly EN2, settlement development boundaries. This was addressed in the planning appeal decision on Linden Homes, 240 houses at the top of Halstead Road on the 6th of the 7th, 2016. The inspector, in granting the appeal, included that a reduction of over 200 metres of the green gap, or a 31%, is acceptable to be able to comply with EN2, which would be considered the minimum gap, paragraph 11 of his response. This proposal is for closing that gap completely on the eastern boundary, meaning coalescence, and reducing still further the strategic green gap between the new development and the solar farm. Appeal number 3196412, land west of Edenside, Frinton-on-Sea, 85 houses. The appeal inspector, in paragraphs 20 to 25, states, the impact on the green gap is far greater concern, going on to say, I consider it significant that the proposal would have significantly breached both the local green gap and the reduced sized strategic green gap, dated the 20th of May 2019. Another appeal, 3259859, land east of Halstead Road, for 130 houses, the inspector stated in paragraphs 23 to 25, the strategic gap between Kirby Cross and Kirby Le Soken, where there is genuine short to medium-term risk of coalescence, is prioritised for protection, going on to say the proposal would have an adverse effect on the character and appearance of the surrounding countryside and would cause unacceptable harm to the green gap. Both appeals were dismissed. The appeal on the Linden Homes development established the new boundaries of the strategic green gap, and the subsequent appeals upheld the principle of keeping the strategic green gap as it now is. Once virgin land is built upon, it is considered brownfield. Local plan, glossary of terms, page 184, states, land which is or was occupied by a permanent structure and any associated fixed surface infrastructure is considered previously developed land, i.e. brownfield. As to only 40 years of use, similar was said of the Thames Barrier. The the Environment Agency, do not look to replace it now for a further 50 years. Need. There is no need for tendering to have any more of its land. Communities upset radically, as in this case, changed by the demand of the nation. The new proposed substations for the National Grid, Northfolds and 5 estuaries is an idea for this development. Tendering is green. Electricity is used at the closest point of production. We generate far more electricity than we can use. That leads on to planning gain. Do we get cheaper electricity? What planning gain do we get? What is in it for us? Nothing. The oil industry isn't going to let their petrol sites close down. They will find ways to sate the demand for all fuels for all vehicles. Finally, I would like to ask the committee to consider refusal. This proposal will be appealed, and then we can see if the local plan is as robust as I think it is. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. Thank you, officers.
Application was called in by 2 tendering councillors. I'll start with Councillor Anne Davis, as I know she has another appointment. So
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening all. I'm opposing this application on behalf of an overwhelming majority of residents. Serious concerns have been raised regarding the need for an electric vehicle charging station and the impact of a solar project covering much of our green gap with metal and plastic for the next 40 years. I share those concerns. Much of what will be discussed tonight is technologically new ground and hopeful speculation on behalf of Naturalis. Because the technology is relatively new, future ramifications are unknown. No one has a crystal ball to predict the effect of land covered with plastic and steel over 10 years, never mind 40. It would be wise to be cautious. This we do know. Solar panels do not work at night. They work very little in winter and not all the time in summer. They shade and cover the ground so that natural runoff from rain is compromised, causing unnatural water channels to develop, rather than general absorption into the soil. Panels will need cleaning from time to time. This we do not know. What will be the long-term impact from the runoff from those cleaning agents? How will the artificially formed new rainwater channels created by the shading of the panels over the ground impact on what was once a green gap? How long will it take desiccated land to recover after 40 years of such treatment? Will the promised swales, sited below existing new swales from the Linton Homes development, be able to cope with the increased runoff from the solar panels, particularly under seasonal severe and prolonged wet weather? Is this likely to alleviate or exacerbate the regular flooding of the gardens of Dugmore Avenue? Solar energy is a fantastic resource, but it needs to be garnered from the right places. The Sahara Desert will be one of those places. The Kirkby-le-Soken Green Gap is not. Solar power is 600 times greedier in terms of land use than conventional power stations. The massive bandwagon for solar, 3,000 to 4,000 applications nationally, no one knows the exact number, could cause massive losses of agricultural land at a time when we need to be growing more of our own food due to the changing climate and the impact of the war in Ukraine. We currently have the lowest availability of arable land since World War II. That availability is still declining. Do we really want to cover local arable land with a glinting sea of plastic and metal? We should remember that, as a former Secretary of State once opined, protecting the global environment is not an excuse for trashing the local environment. Rather than protecting the green gap, the proposed solar farm would create a 40-year coalescence of arid reflective flatness with a cumulative impact of barrenness that may take decades to recover once the shiny sea is finally removed. Land is a finite resource, as is the countryside. The place for solar panels in our uncertain and cold climate is surely on south-facing roofs, the tops of buildings such as hospitals and schools, and, if possible, temporary utilisation of empty school playgrounds during the summer. Electric vehicles. We have 380 approximately electric vehicles in the entire tendering area. How many of those are hybrids is unknown. Do we really consider that people will travel up a hill to the middle of nowhere, sorry Kirby, to charge their vehicles on the way to the beach? One must assume that EV owners have charging facilities at home. New home builders are recommended to install charging points for future buyers. TDC is proposing charging points at car parks throughout the district. However, one must assume that a majority of EVs are hybrid, running on petrol when the battery runs low halfway up the A1. The mileage capacity of a non-hybrid car is halved in the winter when power is needed for heating, lights and windscreen wipers. The rational and responsible places for charging points for electric vehicles include motorway service stations, town and city car parks and petrol stations, and arguably at regular intervals along the hard shoulder of our motorways, not a once green field in Kirby. However, technology is changing fast and EVs may never take off as predicted. In 2035, there will still be many of us driving reliable old petrol cars, and the new thing may then be hydrogen-powered vehicles. So why are we even considering plastering a green field with concrete in order to facilitate an unwanted and unneeded feature that technology will probably render outdated in the next decade or so?
Councillor Davis, can you wind up, please?
Sorry?
Can you wind up, please?
I will. Technology is the future, but that tech ain't necessarily electric cars. Time does not permit to refer to police concerns re the crime and antisocial behaviour associated with solar farms, nor the inappropriateness of more traffic on the Halstead Road, nor the unsightly fencing proposed, nor the minimal contributions to the national grid that such a small solar energy scheme would affect, nor medical concerns re batteries and pacemakers. The overused and mealy-mouthed phrase would cause less than substantial harm at the lowest level of harm surely represents nothing more than the opinion of someone not personally affected by the issues. The voice of local residents who understand and care about the needs and beauty of this small green part of England is equally an opinion, but one with more gravitas and worth more than an anonymous report writer who will not be held accountable when things go pear-shaped. To conclude, we have three to conclude. One sentence. We have three local landowners who have refused lucrative offers from Naturalis. Let us not only salute their integrity, but uphold and underpin it by refusing this unwanted and mistaken application. Thank you.
So, Councillor Clifton.
Right, thank you very much, Chairman. Members, good to see you all again. Welcome to what has been the bane of my life. I am so ecstatic that it has finally come to Planning Committee. The reason this has been the bane of my life was as soon as it came to my attention, it really intrigued me. This is not a housing application. This was something completely different. And to gauge public opinion on this, I took to local social media to determine what the feeling was around this. And the response I received was Brexit split in, I would say, genuinely in favour of it. So it put me in quite a predicament, but a lot of points and issues were raised, and I spent a lot of time researching an awful lot of stuff. And I would just like to take this point and opportunity to say that it did push me to my mental limit. I did nearly have a bit of an episode, and I would like to thank Anastasia at TDC for her support. And if any other councillor should need that kind of assistance in the future, please do not hesitate to contact her. It's a far better way to go. So, straight onto this application. Obviously, when it was first presented to me, I shared the concerns about the strategic green gap. It took a lot of research into what the local plan said on this, and as I read more and more of it, it kind of made slightly more sense. Policy PPL 6 states that development should not happen in the strategic green gap. It's been a very well thought over by our officers over the last few, or since I've been elected. Some 500 houses have been applied for to be built in this location in 4 different applications, and they've all been upheld either by appeal, as Councillor Turner said, or officer refusal. Policy PPL 6, however, states that development will be considered in the strategic green gap if it meets the criteria and the objectives set out in the local plan. These objectives include improving the environment, reducing our effects on climate change, which a solar farm pretty much does. In fact, when you really delve into it, the strategic green gap policy doesn't stop development, it just makes it incredibly hard. And one of those items that you could build there is a solar farm. So that took a lot of researching to go through. One of the other big points is the charging of the Eco Hub. Again, a bit of a contentious issue, and the reason why I support that is because when I was elected to town council nearly 8 years ago, one of the first problems presented to me was the chaos that is caused by the school run of a morning of an evening. It's carnage down that road. The thing that attracted me with this application when it was finally considered is the additional parking spaces. This will provide parents with the ability to park elsewhere instead of Housestead Road, improving what is the traffic flow, which is always the big point of contention. People always moaned that the buses can't get through on time. So now I have a solution to that problem, which is one of the reasons why I called this in favour, because there is no other way to achieve this. I have spoken with officers in the past when we was offered that walk around our wards, and officers did explain to me that we have tried as a council before on this very particular piece of land to sort out a parking issue, but unfortunately TDC was unsuccessful in those attempts. So those are the main reasons I do support it. Going back to the solar farm and talking about the environment, we've had the Linden Homes development, as Cap thankfully demonstrated on the map in front of us. Just to the right-hand side, to the east, we now have Taylor Wimpey putting in another 200 plus homes, which means we've got 500 plus homes going in 2 rather large fields. The environment in our area has been absolutely decimated. We have found dead bats on the floor. Thankfully, with this development, we now have a chance to rebuild that commitment back to the local environment. I believe the development is installing new trees with bird boxes, bat boxes, insect hotels in that little bit in the middle, so the top right-hand side. 2.5 kilometres of hedging. I think I read somewhere it's 106% increase in biodiversity. The really big thing I like about it is the fact it's going to be grazed by sheep. There's no more going to be herbicide or pesticide sprayed there. So in terms of improvements to the environment, it massively achieves that. I'm aware of my time. One of the biggest issues that I suffered doing research on is this issue of the brownfield site. And hopefully the officer can conclude this for me. Virtually every single solar farm in the country is temporary permission. It will be removed at the end of its lifetime. There is a fund set aside by the applicant to remove it when its time comes, and it will be returned back to the condition of the land it was left in, which means it does not qualify as a brownfield site, which has been one of the biggest bones of contention for residents. I have a few more things to say, Mr. Chairman. I'm aware I've hit my 5-minute time. May I proceed, or do you want me to end it there? John? I've hit my 5 minutes. Can I continue, or do you want me to call it time?
Going to say, Councillor Knowles, who I understand had an unfortunate road traffic accident. She is the ward councillor for Kirby Cross, just over the boundary, and she has asked me if she wrote her submission, whether
can I just interrupt you there?
Could actually
if I can interrupt you there, Chairman. Unfortunately, Councillor Knowles couldn't be here tonight due to work commitments. She would like to speak if I am permitted. I did ask prior permission of the officers if I could speak on her behalf. She has sent me sort of a little notepad to read from. With your permission, I will read that as best of my ability. Yes. There is also a member of the public who was involved in a car accident recently, which is why she cannot attend this evening. So with your permission, which one would you like first?
Please do. Please do. Yeah.
Would you like Councillor Knowles' notes or the member of the public? Which one? Or doesn't it matter? As I've got the member of the public up, I'll read that one first. Yes.
Sorry, you've got a member of the public to read it.
Yes. Uli Power of Housestead Road.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. Mr. Gary. Yes, yes. But she, nevertheless, she is the captain. Taken a speaker yet on in favour of the application. So I'm assuming that Councillor Knowles might be in favour of it, in which case I'll accept a member of the public reading it, if you've got a member to do so.
Councillor Knowles took a neutral stance on the application. But I will read the member of the public's first.
Right.
John, there's two states. Councillor Clifton.
Advice, I can take one to be read by your good self from Councillor Knowles. Unfortunate that the member of the public who was going to speak in favour of it have rather missed the gap, because we've closed our yeah. Let's get you reading Councillor Clifton, Councillor Knowles' statement, if you would.
Okay, Chairman, bear with me 1 second. Let me find the email. Okay. Again, she'd like to thank officers and members for their time here this evening to listen to this debate and to listen to her talk. She regrets that she cannot be here this evening. She too is ecstatically happy that this has finally come to a meeting, and she now finally might get some attention from myself instead of looking into this all the time. She was very, very well aware of issues concerning the number of members of the public's letters of objection. She wanted to highlight issues of some of those members. From this, we have issues concerning health and safety. There are a few members of the public who raised issues about radiation coming from either the solar panels or the batteries, and has asked for the officer to confirm that. She has also raised the issue of the brownfield site, which was a huge issue with a number of members of the public. Again, if the officer can confirm the situation around that. Again, a number of members of the public have complained about possible increases in traffic. But on the flip side, she has turned around and said, obviously, as a council, we did declare a climate emergency. The world is burning as we are speaking. We have to do something. We can't be seen to be doing nothing. The Queen even said at COP26 last year, may God rest her soul, that as politicians, there is enough time to talk. We now need to do action and try and do something. That's been covered that. And so yeah, but she also concludes that the additional parking spaces, coupled with the completion of the Linden Homes car park, soon to be completed as well. This should take approximately up to 70 vehicles or 70 parking spaces off of Housestead Road for the schools to for the school parents to park up and not cause an incident on the Housestead Road anymore, which should make it safer for children. That is pretty much what she wrote. Thank you.
Right. Thank you for that, Councillor. I'm sorry about the misunderstanding, and I'm pleased to hear that Councillor Knowles hasn't been involved in the road accident after all, but some member of the public has, if I got that right. No.
Yeah, no, it was quite a. It was in the papers and everything. Uli's accident. It was quite upsetting. Right. Her statement was messaged forward to the officers So I don't know if it's any at all possible, perhaps the officer could read it out on her behalf instead of myself to have a change of voice.
Right. Yeah. Right. I think I've got it. We have a system whereby obviously you notify the officer that you wish to speak either for or against it. And unfortunately, on the sheet that I've got no indication that there was a member of the public. But if I'll be very, very tolerant because of my misunderstanding, if there is something from a member of the public in favour of it and we didn't have anywhere there, I will take it if you've got somebody to read it for you. Yes. Right, we'll take that, Mr. Partridge, because and you realise that that will be limited to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Just to give the background before I start, Yuli Power did get permission from committee services to speak and submitted her speech, so then perhaps was something lost in communication, but it's well within 3 minutes, so I'll go. Good evening all, thank you for letting me speak. My name is Yuli Power and I've been a resident of Halstead Road since 2007. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, energy prices have soared to historic heights. Uncertainty of reduced electricity imports from Europe and insufficient gas supplies could cause power cuts to households this winter. Yet we have the opportunity to invest in renewable energy that would end the uncertainty. There is no energy security without investing in renewables and building a safe and sustainable future. Internal combustion cars will not be sold after 2030, but we need to be prepared earlier than that. The market share of electric cars in October was already 21.4%, and that's with supply bottlenecks. It's not even thinking about the future, it's thinking about right now. Up to 2,000 homes locally would not be able to charge an electric car at home due to not having a driveway or living in flats. A third of UK homes do not have a driveway, and there is a severe lack of public charge points. The question is not if we like electric cars or charge points. The fact is, it's the future. It will be happening regardless. Are we going to be ready and prepared to provide residents and tourists with a charge point or lag behind? It would provide a recharging facility for those local residents, long-distance travellers and day trippers. Businesses in Tendring who are increasingly in need of visitor income would struggle without tourism. I see it as a welcome and sorely needed investment locally, and it will provide the opportunity for some high-tech jobs. I do not fear the traffic on Halstead Road would be affected. In fact, I believe the additional parking may relieve the parking situation during school times. The question is, are we going to seize this opportunity and provide an equal opportunity for residents who are unable to charge at home, or are we going to let this slip through our hands, ending up having to deal with the consequences in the near future? Thank you.
Right, thank you, Mr. Partridge. Now, before we start the debate, does the officer wish to add anything that he's heard earlier or wish to challenge anything that he's heard? Right, planning manager would like a quick word, I think. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Mentioned a few times was the definition of previous developed land. Now, actually, to be fair, the way people were talking about it has actually caused me to read this several times through, to be clear. So this is the NPPF definition of the previous developed land. It is not as straightforward as it may seem, because we are dealing with a structure on land, and we have the hub, which is clearly a permanent building and change of use there. And then we have the solar panels that are structures and change of use. However, the definition refers to what becomes previously developed land if it's a permanent structure. This is not, in my opinion, a permanent structure. The energy hub is, so that parcel of land, certainly. The solar panels, in terms of structure, are not permanent. And the reason they're not permanent is because if this was to be approved, we have conditioned the decommissioning and removal of those structures. But it's actually slightly more complicated than that, because even if they were deemed to be permanent, the latter half of the definition also talks about land that was previously developed, but where the remains of permanent structures or fixed surface structures have blended into the landscape. Well, in 40 years when they're removed, they would not just have blended, they would have disappeared. And therefore, I would argue that the landscape would have been restored in that sense. And just to add to the complication of this slightly, the use of land is also controlled by the condition. This permission is effectively a very long temporary permission in respect of the solar panels. It is a 40-year time-framed condition, and it is about use as well as structure. And therefore, the use shall end in 40 years, as we are recommending. And when that use ends, it reverts back to the last use. The last use is agricultural land. So on that basis, I would deem agricultural land not to be previously developed land either. So wrapping that up, I would not consider this specific proposal with the specific recommendation that we have before you to be considered to be previously developed land at the point that the 40 years would expire. In terms of coalescence, I can come back to that maybe as necessary to advise members if they so wish.
Right, thank you very much. Right, councillors, now is your chance to have a crack at this. What questions have you got for Mr. Lang first? Yes, Councillor Green. I beg your pardon, it's Councillor Harris, yes.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Before I ask any questions, I did say that I would mention something specific today, which I was not happy with. And you know, today on the site visit, which is an extremely important part of this planning process, we attended the site and we were told that we were going to have 2 stops. I've never been to this site before, but we went to one stop, which was the car charging area, and we could clearly see the whole of the site, take it in from that vantage point. We then went round back on the coach, went round the corner, and then stopped, and we saw the 2 fields which are at the top of that drawing there. We could not see the other part of the field. We were not given the opportunity, even though I asked to go and view that, as I was told that it hadn't been advertised, and it was also too difficult, complicated to actually get there. When we've seen through the presentations that there is indeed a public footpath, which we could have done and walked through that. And, you know, I feel that we've made an error there. And I am very concerned that we weren't given the full opportunity to see this site. We are being asked tonight to make a decision, which is a massive decision, not just for the residents at Kirby Lissoken and Kirby Cross, which it's going to affect, but it's going to have, in my opinion, huge implications for our local plan and the other strategic green gaps throughout the district. So I'm very upset that didn't happen. And, you know, I think I was a bit of a lone voice in saying that we should have indeed looked at the other part of it as well. And I was outvoted. But I wanted to say that tonight. For me, the site visits are our opportunity to look at it on the ground. And I was told, well, you're going to see photographs tonight. Quite frankly, those photographs that we've seen tonight could have been of any field anywhere in the district without us actually seeing it. They are pretty generic photographs. So I feel pretty upset that we didn't do that. And I said that I wanted to make this statement tonight. That's what I'm going to say for now, but I will come back to the question. I'll pass on to another councillor at this moment.
Thank you very much. Point is taken. I'll go for Councillor Guglielmi and then I'll go Councillor Baker.
No, I just want to I just sort of clarify what we heard. Is this after 40 years likely to be returned as a green gap, or is it going to be brownfield site? That is quite a big take.
Yes, as my planning manager just confirmed, once the 40 years is over, there's a condition at condition 11 in the officer's recommendation, which confirms that, after 40 years from when the operational development commences, the land will be returned to its former self via a decommissioning method statement. So it will be returned to agricultural use. The landscaping and the various ecological enhancements will be retained.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. Number of questions for the officer. Could you just confirm the status of the arable land? And I think you made a comment, and forgive me if I'm wrong, about how long it had been in a certain state. If you could answer that. And I do have a couple of others as well, Chairman, if you'll indulge me. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe the solar farm land has been recently in agricultural use. I believe the cereal crop was the use of that land. In terms of the eco hub, the smaller parcel, that's been laid fallow. I don't know the exact number of years, but that hasn't been used for agricultural purposes for the past couple of years, I would say.
Thank you. If I may, Chairman, with regard to the potential glare, I know in the report that it says residents won't be necessarily affected, and it won't be visible from far away. Have we actually, or has anybody actually considered consulting with the CAA and local airports? Because we do have two within tendering, and I'm sure there are flights over it. So I just wonder if you have any comments about that, because it is huge potentially, and it's going to stick out. But I just wonder your thoughts on that, please. Thank you.
Yes, section 6.144 of the officer's report, it confirms that the glint and glare assessment looked into the issue of aviation, and it states due to the size, location relative to and distance from Great Oakley Airfield and Clacton Airport, no significant impacts upon aviation activity is associated. So no further detailed modelling was undertaken.
Thank you for that. I must have read that bit, but obviously I got overtaken by the previous paragraph I was reading. And the last question for now, Chairman, if I may, the distance from the proposed eco hub to the primary school, please.
Yeah, from the access to the eco hub to the primary school is approximately, I think it's about 350 metres.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chairman. Similar to questions that Councillor Baker, the glare, how far from a distance have we done a projected distance of how far the glare can be seen from? I can understand the houses at the top and the houses in the sort of Kirby, the Soken and so on, but how far have they done an assessment how far the glare will be?
Yeah, so the glint and glare assessment looks at a wide radius of affected properties. That looks at the topography of the land, screening features such as vegetation and existing built form, and that's concluded there wouldn't be any adverse impacts. I think the topography and the low level of the actual solar panels and their orientation, along with the landscaping and the existing landscaping that's already there, ensures that there wouldn't be any glint and glare into neighbouring residents' properties.
Thank you, Mr. Lang. Other questions I'd like to ask. The history of this site, is this the only application that's come forward, or has there been previous applications come forward? Councillor Clifton alluded that there was an application for a large number of houses in this area. Seen from other areas, we've got Taylor Wimpey this side and Linden Homes this side. My experience of being a district council almost 21 years, the green gap gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And in my part of the world, it's the case. I just want to know, what's the history? Is this the first application of any sort on this land, or has there been previous applications on this?
Yep, so 6.10 of the officer's report outlines there was an appeal decision or a planning application for 75 houses at the western end of the solar farm site, and that was dismissed by the inspector on the grounds that it would represent a significant urban incursion into the local green gap. In terms of the Eco Hub site, the western parcel, that was the subject of an application at the same time that was associated for football pitches, and that was allowed by the inspector, but that was never implemented.
Thank you. Going by solar farms in other areas of our district, at Wicks and places, so I know there's some on the edge of my area, in Elmstead, Alsford area and Wicks. Has the applicant indicated what other uses they're prepared to do on this site, like have sheep grazed in between the solar panels, have beehives, to have a sort of a beehive economy on solar panel farm areas to utilise the land? And I'll let you answer that, and I'll come back with another question.
Yeah, the proposal includes significant biodiversity enhancements. So there will be bug hotels, bird boxes, bat boxes. There's the area within the middle of the eastern section of the solar farm, which will have high vernacular log piles. And there is I think there's an agreement with a local sheep farmer that sheep will be grazed between the panels as well. So that's been explored.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Lang. In the officer's report, you mentioned CCTV around the site. Who will have access to the CCTV? And whereabouts will the CCTV cameras? Will there be notice to say there will be CCTV cameras up, or will they just put them up in the immediate area?
I would imagine in terms of the CCTV, that will be operated by naturalists, I would believe. In terms of where they'll be located, that's secured by condition. They'll be motion sensitive and they'll be inward facing only, so there'll be no loss of privacy to local residents, but there wouldn't be signage up saying CCTV cameras are present.
Chairman, I would like to. I think it's a matter of courtesy that the applicant should really have signs up. I mean, it's a matter of courtesy to have signs up to say the CCTV cameras in the immediate area. So I would say later on that may be a condition I'd like to put forward. In terms of the hub, is it Halstead Road? I mentioned earlier on the site visit the access. What is the speed limit on that road currently?
It's 30 miles an hour all the way along Halstead Road.
Finally, Councillor Harris mentioned about this land permanent structure or 40 years. Housing, if housing is built, would be permanent, and it would be permanent. It'd be there forever. And solar panels, as indicated by officers and others, is 40 years. And what Mr. John Payman G said in the policy, that is our policy that we've agreed at TDC and the local plan and policy committee. Is that right, that policy? I don't know if Mr. Guyver want to come in there on that policy.
Thank you. I come in point. What Mr. Pateman G read out was the definition of brownfield land that's contained within the National Planning Policy Framework, to which we reflect that within the glossary of our own local plan. So that's national policy that Mr. Pateman G was referring to.
Chairman, I know I don't take it all. Is that in our local plan policy? Is there such a policy in our local plan that us district councillors have voted upon? I know it's in the NPPF, but is there such a policy or something similar or of the same in our local plan?
Thank you. Yeah, no, Councillor Scott. It's the definition. It's the national definition of previously developed land. The council, in its local plan, is required to have conformity with the National Planning Policy Framework. There is not a specific policy in the local plan that refers to the use or constraint of brownfield land, but the policies that are contained within the local plan have had regard to and conform to those of the National Planning Policy Framework. And our local plan inspector, part of her duty was to confirm that that was the case.
Thank you, Mr. Guyver. I knew you would come with an answer. Mr. Chairman, I will come back later with further questions.
Very much. Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Chair. First and foremost, I'm very much in favour of beehives. I'm very much in favour of beehives, and I believe that as from April next year, we might see that the government is more favourable in inclusion in such necessary additives to our countryside and economy. What I'd like to ask questions on now is leading on from Councillor Scott about the CCTV cameras. Now, within the report, I read about from the ARC police liaison officers, which I must admit is very unusual. I've not seen that in a report like this before, nor so graphic. Could you explain to us the CCTV cameras? Will they be active both day and night?
The CCTV cameras will be motion sensitive, so they'll only operate if there is movement within the solar farm itself. So they will be operational, they will always be on, but they'll only record once there's a motion in place.
Will the CCTV cameras operate both day and night?
Yes, they will, yes.
It also goes in depth, ARC goes in depth to explain that there has been a huge amount of theft from these solar farms because I suppose the sheer size of them and easy pickings for metal and various other precious things which are taken. The height of the fence, could you confirm in metres how high that fence will be, please?
Yes, the fencing surrounding the farm will be 2 metres in height, and there'll be planting on the outside of that as well.
In the report, the police highlight 2 options. The first option, or this is the applicant has chosen the second option on this, the fence, deer fence, and the cameras. Once the cameras are in operation, will there be someone manned the other side, or will they just be recorded and then checked occasionally?
I have to be honest, I don't know the operational, how the CCTV cameras will be operated. In terms of them being, they'll be always operational. Once there is motion within the farm itself, they'll be operational, and then it will be recorded. Yeah, and there's a further condition, condition 32, which seeks to secure a crime prevention and site security management plan for the whole development. So that will provide the additional information, and we would consider that in liaison with the Essex Police.
So there is a management plan in action. Right, I would like to move on, if I may, I got a bit confused. Let's put it down to a senior moment, shall we? Councillor Turner was explaining, I missed some of what he said, unfortunately, because someone was talking, you see. And he was talking about a 30% minimum gap. Would you please expand on that? And that would be the previous application which went to the inspectorate.
Do you mind if I come in on that one? Obviously, Councillor Turner was referring to a specific appeal, and that appeal was looking at the intrusion of the strategic gap in respect of a housing development. Now, we can go through the details of that if necessary, but ultimately, I think what members need to discover in their debate is what they are perceiving to be coalescence in the context of the policy. So I've written something down here, and I'll sort of work my way through it. But ultimately, there is a debate here where members will probably need to make their ultimate decision in their own minds of what they think coalescence is. Your policy wording seeks to prevent coalescence of settlements. So this could be taken to mean it is seeking to prevent the predominant character of one settlement with another. And in this case, you've got two residential settlements, and their predominant character is residential housing. But of course, this case is not for residential development. So unlike the appeal case, we are dealing with a completely different form of development, different nature of development. So it's a conversation of that this is not a residential bridge or merging of continuous residential use to create a whole or creation of mass. You have essentially got the retention of the field with structures upon it, but there is a clear difference in character between obviously one settlement of predominant housing, another settlement predominant housing, and this is a different form and character between the two. Now that is what exists at the moment because it's agricultural fields, but the choice is that what's going to exist in the future if it's developed in this form. I would see this as essentially a sandwich. You have a settlement, you have the solar farm, you have a settlement, but in that context, it is not a whole if you took the word coalescence as the dictionary definition. However, if you were to take Green Gap as meaning undeveloped land, and it has to be undeveloped, then obviously this is development, be it temporary for 40 years. And ultimately, that could be seen as coalescence in terms of just looking at it as a mass. So it is not straightforward, but we are coming at it from officer point of view that we don't see this as coalescence of settlement and identity. We see this purely as a development in its as a form, but not one that interrupts or affects the character of two identifiable settlements.
Chair, if I may, so just to sort of round this up, in the previous statement made, I believe, by yourself, is that in the description of what is classed as permanent and in effect not permanent, for the benefit of us here on the committee, are we saying then, in the light of what you've said, to match what you have said, that TDC planning does not deem that these structures are permanent?
Yes, I've said that at the beginning, which is that I don't deem these structures to be permanent on the basis that they are being controlled by the proposal set forward as recommended.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe I'd like to return, please, at some time.
Thank you very much. Councillor Placing next.
Hope mine's simpler. The buffer zones. I've written down a 10-metre buffer and a 30-metre buffer. Is that for the two different sites? Could you clarify, please?
Yeah, the buffer zones to the backs of residential properties at the northern end and the southern end are 30 metres. So you can see there at the top there's 22 metres from the rear boundary of those properties to the fencing, and then a further 8 to the panels. And then 10 metre is the distance between the fencing and landscaping in respect to the public right of way.
Right, then Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chairman. A few questions. You obviously mentioned in his report that one of the benefits, one of the considerations when we're looking at harm v benefit is that it's going to create jobs in the construction of this. Can I ask the officer how many jobs and how many of them will be local?
The supporting documentation says just over 100 jobs will be created during the construction phase. In terms of whether they'll be local or not, I don't have that information, but that's something we could consider as a condition, as a local recruitment strategy, if so wish.
So just to clarify, we don't know, there's possibly 100 jobs, we don't know if any of them are going to be local. Can you confirm whether any of the contractors used on this site will be local businesses as well?
Yeah, I believe that's one of the features that the developer is looking to implement, the use of local contractors to assist the local business market.
Sorry, can I just clarify that? They're going to use local tractors?
Sorry, contractors, yeah.
Contractors, right, sorry, I thought you said tractors for a minute. I hope they're electric. Okay. Talking of electric cars, now I must point out that I'm actually a big fan of cars. I've been in the motor trade all my life since I was a 16-year-old apprentice, and my business repairs cars, and including we repair lots of electric cars, so I know quite a bit about electric vehicles. Now we heard that there are 380, circa that amount of vehicles in tendering. Do we know whether that is factual? Also, we heard from the applicant as well that there's an 82% increase in electric cars in tendering. Do we know in relation to how many total vehicles we have in tendering, so that we can look at that as a percentage of how many vehicles, compared really?
Yeah, in terms of the 380 figure, that came from the Highway Department's comments. And that was at the end of 2021. So that was, they looked at the registration of vehicles in the district. In terms of the total registration in the district, I wouldn't know that figure. So I wouldn't be able to give you an accurate percentage, but I imagine that's fairly low.
Okay, I mean, can we just, that would be a low percentage of the total figures. And can we say that there's thousands and thousands of, tens of thousands of cars throughout tendering, and there's probably tens of thousands of cars queuing up with the traffic lights as well in Kirby. But so it's a small percentage. And when we talk about an 82% increase, I mean, in terms of vehicle, I checked how many electric vehicles tendering council run, and I was informed today it's 5. So, if we make that to 10, that's a 100% increase, and 100% sounds really good. So percentages can be made to look at exactly what you want. So it's a relatively small number, but we can probably accept that it's a growing number, but who knows where we're going to be. In terms of the question over whether something's permanent or not, I mean, 40 years, I mean, it's pretty permanent to me, because I won't be here in 40 years' time, and maybe one or two of us around won't be as well. So it's pretty permanent for us. So is it also possible, because I think Councillor Turner sort of pointed out that, you know, the Thames Barrier in 1982 was only going to be here for a set amount of time before that was sort of rebuilt, etc. And guess what? It's still there, and it's going to be there for another 50 years. And I was there when it opened in 1982. Is it possible that they could come back and, you know, apply for a variation of those conditions and increase the time period?
Yeah, that could be a feasibility. They could apply to extend that period, and then we'd have to assess it on its merits at that time.
So just to clarify, it is possible that they could vary the conditions, those conditions. I mean, who knows what the planning committee in 40 years' time is going to look like? Probably all robots, I should think. But, you know, so it is possible they could vary the conditions, and they could say, well, it's another 40 years. In which case, or there could be something else. But it could be deemed as permanent. And somebody in the future also, if they went to the planning inspector could take a different view to TDC and the statement that you made about whether or not that it's a permanent, could take a different view that it is actually a permanent, and view this as brownfield and a development, and therefore they could, you know, put houses there at some point. Is it possible that could happen?
You are given the opinion at this time. I can't, unfortunately, foresee the future. I wish I could. In respect of the NPPF, for example, is a working, changing document. It changes every few years. So therefore, the government may decide to have a very different understanding of previously developed land. Now, for example, not so long ago, we just assumed that, you know, gardens are always going to be brownfield, but there was a definition change that said that actually some gardens, domestic gardens, can be considered to be greenfield. So depending on the location, so it evolves as a document and ultimately may change. I can't foresee that. I can only give you the current definition as we as officers see that to recommend to you, and your job is only to determine the application as it on its merits today. In terms of the potential, this is a renewable energy project, and so I probably should also point out that, and going back to the National Planning Policy Framework again, paragraph 158 does talk about renewable energy schemes, and it does say here that local planning authorities should not require applicants to demonstrate the overall need for the renewables or low carbon energy, and recognise that even small scale projects provide a valuable contribution to cutting greenhouse gas emissions. That is a key point within the NPPF that you should perhaps be aware of in your debate going forward.
Okay, just to come back in on that, if you can just clarify. I mean, this is taken from our local plan here, and it talks about the National Planning Policy Framework, and it requires local planning authorities, i.e. us, to adopt proactive strategies to mitigate climate change and promote sustainable development by effectively exploiting the free resources of wind and sun. In particular, renewable energy can reduce the demand for fossil fuels, which are a finite resource, and release the carbon into the atmosphere and accelerate global warming. And it then goes on, tendering district council supports renewable energy generation in terms of wind energy, solar and biomass. Would you say that, you know, if the planning inspectorate was to look at this, would you be able to say that tendering district council are a green council that supports renewable energy projects?
Unfortunately, I can't answer on behalf of Tendring District Council. I can only give you advice as a planning manager for the planning applications before you. So I can't answer that.
Well, let me help you out. It says in the local plan that TDC currently has one wind farm comprising of 5 large-scale wind turbines at East Earls Hall Farm, west of Clacton, a number of medium and small turbines throughout the district, several solar farms that are concentrated in the northern part of the district, with a small array of adjacent farms. A significant biomass generator also exists at Elmstead. The council has supported the offshore wind farm at Gunsfleet Sands, which required onshore infrastructure. And I know that we are also talking about an expansion in terms of the wind farms that are currently out there as well. So the reason why I mention that is in our plan, would you agree that actually this council, in terms of this went to appeal, would you agree that that is a robust defence to say, well, actually, we are a green, we can demonstrate that we're a green council because of all these other projects?
Thank you, Chairman. No, I understand the question, Councillor Harris. And this is an authority that has declared a climate emergency. This is an authority that has policies in its local plan that reflect national policy and the positivity around renewable energy and such installations. And Councillor Turner referred earlier to the fact that a lot of development of that nature has happened off the coast of our shores. And Councillor Turner was questioning what benefit to the local residents. That was one of the points he's made. So there is a strong recognition that this authority and the sea around this authority is contributing towards the fight against climate change. But as a planning committee tonight, the duty before you is to consider the merits of this planning application before you, which my officers have prepared a report containing their balanced view and their recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Guyver. I mean, absolutely. We are looking at this application, but I think it's well worth knowing that we are a green council and that we do support projects like this. And I think it's good information for us. The question I've got for you as well is, and I'm again reading from this, it says that the council is particularly supportive of the use of solar panels and will expect them to be incorporated into new development wherever possible and practicable. Now, it was mentioned earlier that there's and we saw from the distance, although we didn't get the chance to go up there, unfortunately, but we saw in the distance there's a new development, and we spoke about it tonight. It's been mentioned a few times at Linden Homes, I believe. So there's a significant number of houses. I wonder if you could confirm how many houses and whether or not any of those houses have got solar panels on the roof.
Unfortunately, I can't confirm how many houses have got solar panels on that particular development. We'd have to go away and come back with an answer to that one. But I suspect that not many, if I'm perfectly honest. And you know what? I will be blunt here. I'm very disappointed myself. You know, it is, and especially as where development of roofs can actually be integrated to the roof solar panel. It doesn't actually have to be an add-on. It is very rare to even see those. It is a point well made.
I would share your frustration in this, and I would state that, you know, in terms of houses, we're building 585 houses a year. That's how many, and yet this committee and the planning department can't actually turn around and say for future new houses that you've got to put solar panels on the roof. And I think that is absolutely wrong. And but I'm going to get off my soapbox there. Can you confirm how many strategic green gaps are in this new local plan, please, throughout the district? You'll start for 10.
Quite a few. Can you give us a moment to have a quick look through? Bear with me.
Right, I'm taking that Mr. Harris is wound up now. I've got 3 more speakers still, and then we've got to get into the general debate. So, Councillor Scott.
Sorry, Chairman, I haven't finished yet. I'm waiting for my answer. This is important, and you know, I mean, I can quickly go straight into the debate with all of these as well, if you so wish. But this is important that we know how many strategic gaps that we have throughout the district, because the decision that we make tonight could have an impact on those as well.
Mr. Geiger.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm referring to the topic paper that the Council produced for the local plan examination, where strategic green gaps were one of the subject of challenge. And there are 6 areas that we were asked to defend as part of that. Clacton to Little Clacton, between Clacton and Holland-on-Sea, land between Clacton and Jaywick, land between Dovercourt, Ramsey and Little Oakley, land between Frinton, Walton, Kirby Cross and Kirby the Soken, that is the green gap subject of tonight's application, and one at Lawford, Manningtree and Missley. And the council was successful in defending the inclusion of those green gaps in the local plan.
So when you say that we were successful in defending those strategic green gaps, what you mean is that this was thoroughly examined by the Planning Inspectorate. We had public open meetings. You were absolutely put on the spotlight and grilled, and lots of people were, in terms of making sure that this was acceptable. And this has been challenged at the highest level in terms of planning in the UK. And these strategic green gaps have been accepted as legitimate areas that are important in terms of stopping the merging of these villages and towns, etc. So can we just, and also can you just add right on there, is how long has it taken this council to prepare to go back to them and actually finally get the final agreement with the local plan? So how long have we taken to get this to where we are today?
Thank you, Chairman. I won't go into great detail on the specifics, but the fact that you have local green gaps and a policy that relate to local green gaps in the local plan is a result of being successful in defending the inclusion of a policy and the green gaps as shown on the map. I'm not going to say that I was grilled to the nth degree on everybody, because I'd probably be overemphasizing a bit, but it was subject to the statutory examination process. In terms of the length of time to from adoption of the previous local plan in 2007, which life scale was to 2011 to 2022, is of course 11 years.
So just to repeat that again, it's taken this council 11 years to get to the point where we've got a local plan which includes the strategic green gaps. You're shaking your head. That's not.
Chairman, if I may, just to clarify the point, strategic green gaps, or a version of strategic green gaps, were a feature of local plans previous to this one as well. But the council was successful in carrying forward gaps in certain locations, but had to review its position as part of that process in determining which green gaps are protected as part of the local plan, which is before you now.
I think they were called local green gaps before. Is that, yeah, local green gaps, now they're called strategic green gaps. But it's taken us a long time to get where we are, and this is a defendable position where we are now. If this committee was mindful to approve this application, and we were to accept that it's not a permanent structure, that it's not going to cause a significant merge between these two locations, if we accept that, is there, and I know we're not looking at anywhere else tonight, but would it be possible that the same argument could then be applied to all the other areas and all the other strategic gaps that we have throughout the district? Because the same argument would apply, wouldn't it?
Possibly, yes, in respect of solar panels that are not permanent.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
I understand that, Chairman. Other councillors have just been speaking just as long, so I think I have the same right as any other councillor. Access points on the site. I'd like to ask the officer, when they are building if it's approved and they're building the solar panels, where are the access points? This is a large area. Where are the designated access points? Is it going to be in one place? Access these fields for erecting these solar panels, or are they going to be designated across the area?
Yeah, so in terms of vehicular traffic, it's one access of Housestead Road. As you can see on the screen there, that will be directly onto Housestead Road, 7.5 metres wide. This will be used for the construction and then for infrequent visiting by maintenance staff once it's operational.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Lang. The interesting thing is there was talk about increase the figure of 380 odd electric cars across the district, and I know the new builds in our district will have some charging points. In my area, an area where we've had large sums of development in my area where we have charging points, and I can see in Kirby there will be. The new builds will have charging points, so there is a demand for electric vehicles in the coming years. It may go down when they bring in the tax disc levy in 2025, but that's something for the government, whoever it is. We have to decide on that. I have no other questions at the moment, but I know that I will come back with my colleague here with the debate further on.
Right, thank you very much, Councillor Scott. Mine is a very, very brief one. Page 61, Health and Safety Executive, say that if we're developing a substation or storage of electrical energy, such as a large battery storage unit, we've got to get in touch with ONR if it's near a nuclear installation. They don't tell us how many miles, but my estimation, it's either Bradwell or Sizewell, and I think that is well out. And if I'm right, we don't have to consult the ONR at this stage. No.
Yes, that's correct. It's not adjacent or nearby to one of those installations. Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Very quick one, Councillor Baker. Then
it's just one question. Could you put up the picture that shows the area of the housing of Linden Homes, and once we get to that, then I'll ask the question. Okay, so how much has any of Linden Homes that won, I understand, their application on appeal, was that part of the strategic green gap at the time, or whether it's in the previous or when was it done? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Baker. Yes, the site was part of what was the local green gap, because, of course, the appeal was heard before the adoption of the new local plan. But under the local plan of the time, it was a local green gap. And as Councillor Turner alluded to in his representations earlier, there was a lot of debate, and the inspector had to consider how much of a gap would be retained if the development would take place. So I can confirm, yes, it was part of a local green gap as per the policy of the previous adopted local plan.
One quick question to follow on from you there, but is it also right at the time, this was before our new local plan, so this was when we had an out-of-date local plan, 2007, and that was when we didn't have the housing numbers agreed, so the planning inspector would have balanced that on the number of houses that were needed, and the fact that we had an out-of-date plan probably weighed in his mind that that the houses were needed. Now that we've got the numbers of agreed 585, then if we'd have had that at the time, he may, we'll never know because we're not there, but he may have viewed that differently. But at the time, those houses were badly needed in terms of numbers for the district.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Yes, at that time, the challenge to the council was that it was not delivering upon the housing requirement. It was unable to demonstrate a 5-year supply, and therefore the inspector in their deliberations had to consider whether the housing should be allowed as an exception or a departure from the local plan, taking into account its location in the Green Gap. But just to clarify, that was in relation to housing development, and the National Planning Policy Framework provides very specific guidance around having to do that in the event that you can't demonstrate a 5-year housing supply.
Right. That is the end of the questions. There's nobody else. So, councillors, is there anything now that you want to go on? We should now debate it and hopefully get an answer. I don't want to shorten anything because it's a very important application that we've got in front of us tonight. So, we'll start the speaking, and Councillor Baker would like to do just that.
Having listened to everybody, including the speakers, and making notes as I do, obviously renewable energy is a big thing and is required, but I think the officers have made a recommendation for approval. They have interpreted our local plan policies. I think that we as a committee need to look carefully at those policies, some of those that have been quoted in the report, because I think you can go either way. You can either say, yes, it's great, let's have it, and everything else, it's only 40 years. But as I think Councillor Davis said, in 10 years' time, the whole world could have changed, and we could either have gone very backwards or we could have gone forwards very quickly. But we've also got to consider that the coalescence of settlements. And I know Mr. Pateman G mentioned about residential, but from what I read in policy PPL 6, it doesn't say residential, it just says settlements and coalescence of settlements, and they will be protected. So this is one of 6 or 7, and as Mr. Guyver has said and Councillor Harris has alluded to, we fought to protect green gaps on this committee. We've got policies in place to protect green gaps now that we can rely on, thankfully, because the inspector said our plan is sound. 18 months ago, this committee would potentially be looking and saying, well, can we protect it or not? We tried, we've done it, we've succeeded in some places, and we've been overturned. If you look at the Linden Homes application that's there, that probably wouldn't have been approved if it had come before us now and was outside the settlement boundary. So I think we have a duty to weigh this up very, very carefully, whether the benefits of this, and there's, I will let other colleagues obviously speak, but I have got comments on other policies that say certain things that can be interpreted different ways, but we have to be very careful, very careful. It's a huge application site. There are a number of people who are for it, and as Councillor Clifton said, there are a huge number of people against it. But we have to look at policy and make a decision based on what our policy is, what the advice we've been given, and everything else. So at the moment, I can't make any proposal at all as yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know, I'm having difficulty with this. Yeah, but it's not on, it's up higher. Don't interfere. No. Stay on. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Chair. Look, I'm in a dichotomy and a big one as well. The idea of renewable energy, yes, I'm all in favour of that. Wow, am I? The endless destruction of rainforest in order to grow and to rip into the soils to get out fossil fuels and precious materials to make all kinds of things. We need to move on away from where we are standing so that our great-grandchildren can have a future and to walk into their kitchens and switch a light on. And this can be achieved, and it can be achieved now. But the dichotomy. I would think myself less than a responsible member of this committee if I did not reflect back to the strategic green gap. This was also defended fiercely at Centenary Way when we were looking at exactly the same thing. And we went with that, and we stood by the fact that the gap was vital. And this ended up in all manner of things. I think, Chair, if you'll correct me if I'm wrong, please, that it did actually end up in the High Court and was subsequently, they lost. Strategic green gaps are so important to us as a nation because it's what separates us and makes small villages rather than one blobby conurbation in which we are all thrown together. And we lose an awful lot of the impetus of our daily life. We don't become someone from some village, we become something from a massive conglomerate. So I'm like Councillor Baker on this. I cannot come to a conclusion. It's a very difficult situation. I don't know if anybody can offer any other solutions to it that I might like to go along with. But at this moment in time, if I'm having to be pushed, I would be pushed slightly not in favour of this because I can see the damage that it can be done long term. And I'm not happy with permanent structure. Something in place for 40 years to me is something that's going to be permanently there. If you picked it up and shifted it about or something occasionally, fine. But that to me is bothering me.
Right, thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Mr. Parker, well, I don't think he's here at the moment, but he probably could have saved us 2 hours worth of debate on questioning, etc. And I think he came up with the right phrase right from the beginning. Go on again. Right. Right product, wrong place. And I think for me, that pretty much sums it up. I do not think, and Ukraine's been mentioned, and you know, and the current energy crisis, etc. I do not think that that is reason enough, and the failure of consecutive governments for the last 40 years to mess our energy policy up should be a reason why the residents of those two areas should suffer, and we should steamroller a solar farm there just because for those reasons. You know, one could also, if you're talking about Ukraine, one could also argue that we have a food shortage, a grain shortage. So let's start growing wheat there because we're going to need that, and rapeseed oil because that's shortage as well. So, you know, it has implications. But so I don't accept that that's a reason. I do support solar. I think that there's in the sort of the group of energy products, and I'm looking at my phone now. As we speak, wind power is the most energy. Is supplying us with most energy in the UK at 47.8%. Gas 31.8%, nuclear 12.7%, hydro 3%, biomass 2.9, imports 1.4, coal 0.3, and solar nothing, because it's dark. But that obviously during the day it was providing stuff. So we get our source of energy from lots of different areas. So you know, the council, as I questioned earlier, in my view, is supportive of green energy. You know, we've got biomass, we've got wind farms, we've got solar farms that have been authorised, and this committee has authorised solar farms. I mean, I know there was one at Wicks that we authorised there, and you know, so we cannot be accused of being anti-green energy. But as Mr. Parker said, it needs to be in the right place. We spent somewhere in the region of 11 years. I know that there's various different reasons why that took that length of time, but we took 11 years to get a local plan which is defendable now, and for something to come outside of these policies, it has to be something really, really exceptional. And when you look at harm v benefits, the benefits have to be huge, in my opinion, in my personal opinion, or certainly significantly outweigh the harm, which it's clearly going to cause. And I don't think the benefits of going into a strategic green gap are there. I really fear, and any resident that's in Little Clacton and all the other areas which I've got listed down here for the strategic green gaps will be sitting here listening, potentially, listening to the decision that we make, and in fear that they're going to get a knock on the door and somebody say, do you know what, there's an application gone in for a solar farm in there, but I thought we were protected in the green gap. We don't want to join up with Greater Clacton or Jaywick or wherever it is, or Clacton. You know, we don't want to do it. Our village, our identity is important to us, and we want to retain that. And I'll read it here from the policy. It says, strategic gaps preserve the physical and visual separation of settlements. We want our own identity. And for us to rip that up and say, I know we've agreed that policy. I know it's been agreed by, it's really sort of the highest authority apart from the minister, the planning inspector has said, yeah, that's perfectly sound. I know he said all that, but I'll tell you what, we're gonna rip that up and we're gonna allow this. And I don't accept that it's not a permanent structure. I don't accept that, you know, that in 40 years' time it's going to be, they're going to take it away and then we're going to have lovely green grass and flowers and nice meadows there again. I don't accept that. Very often we see decisions that are made and things change. None of us sitting here will know what will happen in 10 years, let alone 40 years, what's going to happen to that site. Who knows? And I fear, but for 40 years, regardless of whether it's going to be ripped up or not, but in 40 years, those residents are going to be linked. And for me, it is going to destroy that. And you are going to see that as one group of one development area there. As Councillor Turner pointed out, you know, the planning inspector, who has agreed our local plan, has already made decisions and turned down sort of planning appeals in that specific area and other areas as well. And that we have an even stronger defendable position now. And I feel we owe it to all of the residents across Tendring District to stand by this plan, to stand by those residents as well that are there and turn this down. So I would like to make a proposal that we refuse this application. Thank you.
Is it?
Thank you. I think the word Councillor Alexander used, a dichotomy. I'm reading this, that this would produce equivalent energy, this is equivalent to the energy needs of approximately 6,500 average UK homes, which would be nice if they were all going to be in Tendring and we could reduce everybody's bills locally, wouldn't it? and there is this pressing need to reduce our energy costs and produce our own energy. I think I'm all for protecting our green gaps as well, and we should be using our arable land for what it's there for. But until we can actually do something about solar panels in our dwellings, aren't we proud of the fact that we're on the Sunshine Coast? Shouldn't we be maximising that? Isn't there some way that we can actually push that forward? Because until we sort of maximise that, I feel we're going to get these applications because we're not actually maximising the solar energy that we've got on our coasts. So I'm still a little bit not sure.
Councillor Baker.
Chairman, I'm quite prepared to second Councillor Harris.
Thank you.
While the debate's been going on and while we've been asking questions, I've been scribbling down where the policies are that I feel, and I'm sure Councillor Harris already mentioned most of them, that this does not comply with. And if you're comfortable, I will go through them if you wish. So we start with SPL 3. So Part A says that all new development, and this is a development, regardless of how you look at it, should make a positive contribution to the quality of the local environment and protect or enhance local character. Personally, I don't think this does that. It will change, regardless if it's only for 40 years. 40 years is a long time. 40 years ago, 200 years ago, was the lifespan of a male. So it's taken like that. So SPL 3 Part A design, paragraphs A, B, C and D. So if we go through what A says, new buildings, alteration structures are well designed and maintain or enhance local character and distinctiveness. This proposal does not do that. The development relates well to its site and surroundings, particularly in relation to its siting, height, scale, massing, form, design and materials. It doesn't relate well to its site. The development respects or enhances local landscape character, views, skylines, landmarks, existing street patterns, open spaces, and other locally important features. It's a strategic green gap. It doesn't comply with that. And last one, D, the design and layout of the development maintains or enhances important existing site features of landscape, ecological heritage or amenity value. Well, I don't think it does do parts of those. So that's SPL 3A. Then we go to PPL 3. Bear with me. PPL 3 is the rural landscape, and I count that as rural. The council will protect the rural landscape and refuse planning permission for any proposed development which would cause overriding harm to its character or appearance. As we've said, most of us, strategic green gap. Putting something on it causes overriding harm. So PPL 3. PPL 6, which obviously has been quoted a number of times, which is strategic green gaps. The strategic, and obviously in paragraph 7.6.1 of the introduction to the actual policy, strategic green gaps have been identified in this local plan in specific locations between settlements, and this is shown on map B10 as part of this plan. The strategic green gaps are valid for the role they will play in preventing the coalescence of settlements and retaining the distinct identity of settlements. Councillor Harris said it, these are villages. Manningtree, Mistley and Lawford have suffered from sort of almost coalescing into one, and I personally don't want to see that happen anywhere else. The areas identified have the following characteristics: the open and undeveloped character of the land. They form a visual break between settlements. Their boundaries follow physical features on the ground floor and/or only land required to secure the objectives of the strategic green gaps has been included. And the actual policy, The strategic green gaps as shown on the policies maps and local maps, as I said, it's map B10, will be protected in order to retain the separate identity and prevent coalescence of settlements. And then it leads on to the other things. And finally, PPL 10, if you'll bear with me, which is renewable energy generation and energy efficient measures. Proposals for renewable energy schemes will be considered having regard to their scale, their impact, including cumulative impact, and the amount of energy which is to be generated. Well, it's large, it's 22 hectares. The impact, it impacts on the strategic green gap, it impacts on the 2 villages, and the amount of energy which is said to be generated is up to 6,000 to 6,500 homes. If it said 16,500, I might not even have commented on that. But yes, that is what the grounds I would suggest that we refuse on. Thank you.
Yep, I was coming to you before we have.
Chairman, may I be permitted to comment on some of those policies?
Yep, if the committee is minded to refuse to
provide advice.
Yeah. I've got one speaker, but I'll come to you before we take the vote, John. So, yes.
I just wanted to sort of comment on Councillor Place's sort of dilemma that she has, and I think that, and also for Councillor Alexander as well, in terms of, you know, in what I would suggest is that in terms of the solar farm and green energy, etc., I think we are broadly probably in favour of that. You know, I'm reading from the committee members, but I think, you know, these are, as Officer Gary Guyver has said, our Director of Planning, that we have, was it 5 or 6? 6. There was 6 strategic green gaps here across tendering, and the message that, you know, I want to send in terms of this application, but to the message to send out to all developers: leave our strategic green gaps alone. They're in a plan. Tendering has thousands of acres of land that, if they want to look at those areas, then I think that this committee would view it possibly in a different, well, we would view it in a different way. And you know, we've already given permission for solar farms in other areas. But my view is that we just say, you know, we say no to strategic green gaps. That's what I think that we should defend. Defend this local plan. Defend the policies which Councillor Baker has read out, and we say no. So I would urge, you know, our committee members to think very hard and carefully about the ramifications if we say yes to this.
John, if the committee is minded to oppose your recommendation, undoubtedly if it goes through, it will go to appeal. Are you satisfied that we have got sufficient points, as raised by Councillor Baker specifically, that we can defend the decision?
If I can provide some help that they may wish to take on board. Just looking at the policies suggested, I've got no problem, so let's go run through those. So SP3, in respect of design and character, there is a danger that there is no such thing as a solar panel that is in keeping with local character. So ultimately that causes a fundamental problem in that context. But given the policy as a whole, there are aspects of that policy that I would say do genuinely apply as a whole. So I would have no problem with suggesting that SP3 does come forward as a policy to refuse. PPL3, what you're referring to is overriding harm, and again, I would have no problem with suggesting that would be useful in the context of defending a refusal. I have an issue with PPL 10 in that it refers to obviously renewable energies, but the first couple of lines being referred to do not really set about harm. It considers generation of energy and context, but it doesn't say how. And what I don't wish to see happen, especially in an appeal, is an argument that a certain amount of energy means we should accept it, and a certain amount of energy means we shouldn't accept it. I think we'd get into that debate of arguing energy value versus harm and impact, and I think ultimately that could be dangerous to take forward. My recommendation would be not to include that particular policy. And if I may, Chairman, just suggest perhaps a reason for refusal that members may wish to consider. I'm happy to do that if you would be happy for me to do that. I'm always conscious to suggest this because I have a habit of listening to what members are saying and writing down what I would put forward as a planning officer as a robust reason for refusal. And that is exactly what I have done here. I am happy to give it to you and your members, but I do appreciate I'm only 6 months in the job here, and ultimately I do step on toes sometimes if I've overstepped. So please let me know what you wish to do.
Councillor Harris is the proposer. I'm just going to push you further, so we'll take the vote as soon as you're finished.
Can I just come back on our planning manager and just, I mean, PPL 10, second paragraph down, all development proposals should demonstrate how renewable energy solutions appropriate to the building, site and location have been included in the scheme for new buildings be designed. Isn't the whole premise of our refusal about location?
Thank you. I can understand, Councillor Harris, why you've raised that, but I read the policy slightly differently. So I read the first paragraph: proposals for renewable energy schemes, which we're talking about here, will be considered having regard to their scale, impact, including cumulative impact and the amount of energy which is to be generated. So that's specifically related to proposals for renewable energy schemes. Then it goes on about all development proposals, whether they're renewable energy or houses, and we always think we've spoken about houses and solar panels before. All new development proposals should demonstrate how renewable energy solutions appropriate to the building site and locations have been included. So I think the context of that second paragraph is how do you incorporate renewable energy into other forms of development. The first paragraph is your proposals for new renewable energy schemes and the things that need to be taken into account when considering them.
I'm going to ask you to vote on it now. We've debated at a great length for 2.5 hours. Seconder, go on. I'll give you. I'm waiting again. Right, come on.
Just to confirm, obviously, Mr. Pateman G has given us his advice and thoughts on SPL 3, PPL 3, and PPL 10, but there was also PPL 6. So I'm presuming that was fine.
Yes, sorry, forgive me. I would say yes, obviously you need to include PPL 6. That is the fundamental basis of your debate, as I understand it. I would carry on, actually. You also need to essentially set aside the NPPF paragraph 158, which is in respect of the impacts of the proposal are not considered or able to be made acceptable. So because that specific paragraph refers to renewable energy, and while we should be granting it in a very proactive, positive way, you're saying that in this case, the benefits do not outweigh the harm in that context. I'm going to overstep, and if I was to suggest something, I would probably put it in this context. Ultimately, the development of solar panels, and I think you're concentrating on the solar panels, not the energy hub, because obviously the solar panels are within the strategic green gap. would result in the development of land within a policy PPL6 designation of strategic green gap. By reasons of the development form, scale, siting and location, it would result in the detrimental impact to the open and undeveloped character of the land, reduce, interrupt and remove a visual break for a significant time between settlements. The proposal would result in the coalescence of settlements fail to protect their separate identity, and on this basis would be contrary to all those policies PPL6, PPL3, SP3, paragraph 158 of the NPPF, and that's how I would put it forward to you.
That's it. Let's vote. Now, you are voting on refusal, so it's straightforward. A yes for refusal or no for refusal. So I'll go down them. Is this one where you would prefer to do it with a show of hands, or would you do it the other way? Show of hands, I am told. So it's a show of hands. Those in favour of
Mr. Pateman G mentioned SP3. It's SPL3. Right, so we have got the right policy.
Yeah.
I just don't understand. Thank you. Sorry, Chairman.
show. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And those against refusal? So that application is refused.
And Chairman, me as Councillor Scott abstained.
Two and a half hours, we could probably do it with a quick comfort break. Yeah, I was satisfied with the officer's thoughts that it was it's deemed a temporary.
You know, that's the course of the presentation. I changed my mind.
Can we start, please? Because, well, in a few minutes' time, we'll be against the 3-hour rule. So, unless, of course, you'd like to come back tomorrow, but that's... We'll make a start. We're on application A5, which in the agenda is number 9, I think. It's planning application 22/01232, land at Reedlands, Gutteridge Hall Lane, Wheelie. And I think, yes. Planning manager gets this one. So, John, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just presenting this on behalf of my case officer. So this is the erection of a bungalow. This is in lieu of both deem approval for a dwelling, which that was also subject to a revised siting that was approved in a further application. I'll come back to that in a moment. But let's just quickly go through the case. You were on site today, so you have visited this site, and this is adjacent to Reedlands. A mention on site, which I will just quickly mention now, was that is there a tree preservation order? There is a tree preservation order on the entirety of the site for all trees, as essentially shown in the blue line around here. But all of these trees are not proposed to be affected by this proposal. And we also have an agricultural impact assessment submitted by the applicant that is part of the scheme and recommended in your papers to be conditioned to ensure that the protection of the trees takes place and the trees are not affected by the application. So this is the block plan. This shows the proposed bungalow, which is this part here, to the side of the barn, which is this element just here. And what's also shown on this plan is the previous outline of a further application just there as well. And essentially this is an alternative to that previous planning approval, essentially moving the development to the left and also switching from a shared access position to using the existing access that we also saw on site. Basically, the barn is in good condition and it is considered to be implementable, and so the material consideration of the prior approval and the approved permission are significant material considerations in this case. So just to show you the proposal, this is exactly the same in design terms, in terms of height and width and so on, as the previous approved development, just the location siting is different. The floor plans and some site photos that the case officer took a little while ago now, I suspect, but just to show the site and the barn on site. And that's the existing access. So just to summarize, obviously that is in blue, the barn. That's the approval for a new bungalow instead of the barn. And this is the alternative scheme, which is to go to one side. Ultimately, your recommendation is to include conditions to ensure that at the end, whatever choice is made, there will only be one property resulting. And if it was this application, then ultimately you'd be looking at that sort of scenario of a single property within that curtilage. Your recommendation of the recommendation of the officers is one of approval, given the material considerations of the planning history, and thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Now, Mr. Legree's been sitting there, if he hasn't fallen asleep doing that lot. Welcome, Mr. Legree. And you've got your 3 minutes.
Chairman, it's quite fascinating to always listen to the committee meetings. So, you know, my attendance here for many years has been much the same. Anyway, I'm going to keep it very nice and easy for this evening. You've had a tough couple of hours. I have to say that I thank the plan manager for his very concise and straightforward report. Nothing much really to add, just a couple of minor points, just to say that when we looked at this and the applicant wanted to move the building over, we made it clear to him that he had to overlap with the existing consent, otherwise we'll get into the difficulties of having two different permissions, and whilst that could be dealt with by a legal agreement, we felt that was quite inappropriate. If you had an overlapping permission, it means that only one of the permissions can actually take place. So that was our suggestion, our assistance to our client, and he's followed that, and that works, we believe. I think the coloured plans that Mr. Papenji has shown really do show the case very, very clearly. The only other aspect, just make a point, a couple of members mentioned on the site visit earlier today in relation to the mobile home. The mobile home is not occupied. That doesn't require plan permission to be placed on someone's land. It doesn't also require planning permission if it's being occupied during the construction process. That's quite legitimate under the Caravan Sites Act 1960. Of course, once the new dwelling has been completed, then that mobile home has to be removed from the site. So no difficulty whatsoever with that. That's it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Now, on my list, I haven't got any more speakers. So we'll go to questions. I'm going to grab first, but I'm going to put Mr. Scott down there. I've just got one question. If you could put the drawing up, John, of the sort of multicoloured one. When we were on site this morning, that's right, it's the blue bit I'm interested in. I know the house has, to get the house, the barn, as we saw, has got to be demolished. And the other little bit of habitable dwelling just in front, that you, on the next drawing, you showed it just as a blue block. That's the one. Does that come down as well as the barn?
Yeah, so I was just trying to demonstrate the stages of the applications. The blue would not be there. It would just be the pink element if that approval came forward. Obviously, what we're looking at is the green. And what I was trying to demonstrate, and this is where you try to do something to make things clearer, but possibly confuse things. And I do apologise in that I was trying to show that they actually do overlap in terms of those two positions, just as Mr. Legree pointed out. Ultimately, what you're dealing with is this, which would be no barn, and this is the resulting house. That's what this proposal is about before you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, on the site visit was really interesting. I'm very, very pleased to hear that the trees got TPOs and they'll be retained. What I'm reading on page 115, the renewable energy, about plug-in charging points and so on, but nothing of mention about solar panels on roofs. It means to, you know, we at the previous application, councillors were talking about having dwellings with solar panels on the roofs and such like, and we should push for it and everything else. It'd be nice if we had the same opinion on subsequent applications thereon, that we have solar panels on roofs. We can't say in one application we like buildings with solar panels on, and then there's nothing on here about solar panels on the roof. So I was wondering, are there any? I might have missed something in the report, but are there any solar panels being installed, or is it something we could perhaps ask?
makes the answer. It would be an ideal site for solar panels, but those two lovely old oak trees are going to cut their efficiency down.
I did actually, I know it's ironic, really. We want to keep the trees and the TPOs and then also talk about solar panels. But in the photos, the nice, lovely photos where it's bright sunshine on the roof. And it'd be ironic that we push for solar panels. We can't because when the trees are full leaf, it may be a little bit difficult. However, the section on there on the photo is clearly the roof is sunny and I would argue that we could possibly look into it. I don't know whether Mr. Legree could make a note of that and perhaps look into it, but I'm sure the officer can answer my question.
Okay. Just reviewing, forgive me, you don't have a specific policy that says all houses must have solar panels on. Okay. However, you do have a policy on 1 to 9 dwellings in respect of renewable energy generation plan, which is PPL 10, that you could possibly use to suggest a condition for a statement on renewable energy to be agreed in respect of this application. Although I will say we have to be mindful that was not applied to the previous application, which is a material consideration as well. Ultimately, if I was to be the other party, I would see this as a potential thing that I could very robustly appeal as a condition, on the basis that we very recently granted that other permission without such a condition, and therefore I would even say would even be risk of being unreasonable and at costs. I'm not implying that any party would be unreasonable or want to do that, but I ultimately need to outline all possible scenarios, and I think that is a possibility you should be mindful of.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to repeat what I said at the beginning as well, that I am the ward councillor for Wheelie and Tendring, which is, so this application is within my ward. I'm not predetermined in any shape, form or way. Question, please, to the planning manager. In terms of if this committee is mindful to approve this application, in terms of build conditions, I know Gutteridge Hall Lane very well, and I know that from time to time, you get vehicles coming each way, it's going to block it, etc. So would there be any conditions with regard to the construction and the construction lorries and vehicles that may use that in the build, please? If you can just advise that. Thank you.
I missed the very end of your question. Sorry, you.
Basically, is there anything in the conditions here which, with regards to the vehicle access whilst the construction is going on, that's not going to cause a nuisance to those that are using the lane? I'm sure there is, but if you can just confirm that.
Yeah, so condition 7 on page 117 refers to the already submitted construction method statement that it should already be covered in that respect. So I suspect you're used to seeing a very long list of this is the construction management that they're going to do. Actually, on this occasion, we've already got that ahead of time.
Chairman, if I may come back on that. So thank you very much for clarity on that. I do know as well, I've read through the report here, that there are no representations from members of the public. The parish council have spoken about this at 2 meetings, and they have no objections to this whatsoever. I have no objections to this whatsoever, and I know it's at an early stage, but I'm very happy to propose acceptance of this application. Thank you.
Chair, looking at this, if I may, did you propose this, correctly? Yeah. Do you know, I think I'm going to second this. Okay, so we can move on. Just something for clarification, if I may. Is there anything in our Bible, the MPPF, that tells us that at this moment there's legislation in place that new builds must have solar panels on them?
The answer is no. There isn't anything specific about having to have solar panels. Obviously, there are a range of approaches to this situation. You may have heard the word fabric first is used as an approach. There's no specific, it has to have a solar panel requirement out there.
Chair, some people might know I do rather like trees, as you know. I've got a thing about trees, actually. And looking at those oaks, they were laying dormant. They weren't fully dormant, they were still half awake. But you can imagine them with that canopy open in the height of the summer. One solar panel underneath that would be lost in its splendor. It wouldn't even register. It would be nighttime stuff, I would imagine. And I'm so pleased that these trees are heavily protected.
Taking that as a statement rather than a question. So, right, in that case, I've got nobody indicating they want to speak. I have got oh, sorry, I beg your pardon, Councillor Guglielmi.
Sorry, I just wanted to make it clear that if they go ahead with this new proposal, that the other one will definitely be demolished. That we won't have two on the same site, and that the home will get the caravan, as they call it, the static home will go as well. Just want to make that clear.
So if you approve this application, the barn will be demolished. That is conditioned within your papers. The static caravan, as the agent mentioned, could be there for the duration of construction, but would not be there afterwards.
On with the recommendation, we have the conditions on pages 116 to 119. I think we'll take a vote on it straight away, and we'll do it on show of hands. Those in favour of the recommendation? It is unanimous. That is approved. Thank you very much. Now, councillors, you know what I always have to do. I have to ask you if you would like to continue, it being 3 hours, which has been wished on us. Or, of course, you could come back tomorrow, but there we go. Let us push on. I don't think we need to have a vote on it. Right, now on my, before we start it, to the officers, on my list, I have it that Michael Pegram was going to do it, but I'll whistle over to John for this one. Yeah, good. Right, in that case, we are, if I make sure, we're going right back to the start of the agenda. And it's planning application 22016664, car park, Promenade Way, Brightlingsea. So if you can talk us through it, John.
Sorry, they're quite similar. I'm just checking I got the right one. So this is the application for the car park, Promenade Way, Brightlingsea. So we saw this site today, and ultimately this one is the extension to the existing toilet block. I'm going to be very, very quick and just show you the slides. We saw the building today. And that's the location in terms of the building for changing facilities for the disabled. That's the site that came in. Obviously, it comes out across the hard standing there. You can actually access the car park from the other direction, so that's no blockage there. And that's the proposal: flat roof, timber clad, multicoloured. And the recommendation is as your papers and approval.
Mr. Napine has been sitting very patiently. Would you like to come forward and use the microphone, Andrew? And
good evening. Thank you for keeping me waiting so long. On my day off as well. A brief overview for those of you who don't know what a change in place facility is. It is a facility that severely disabled people, children and adults use when they can't access traditional toilets or traditional accessible toilets. They are vital in our area. They are vital across the country. There's estimated to be 250,000 people minimum who require these facilities. And they have to come with carers, they come with families, and we supply 36 miles of coastline where we should be supplying these facilities for them to access those beaches and the businesses that go with it. We've gained £300,000 worth of funding to supply 3 facilities over the next year and a half. We've already supplied 4. They have been very, very successful and very, very well received. Really all I have to say about them, really.
No, I only want a quick word. I mean, will these be supplied ready for the summer? Very good idea, brilliant. But will they be in?
Criteria for the funding, we have agreed to supply 2 of these facilities by the end of this financial year and a 3rd facility by the end of next financial year. I'm hoping when we go out to tender, we'll be able to supply all 3 before the summer of next year.
That is a right. Questions then to the officer, please. We have Mr. Councillor Alexander, then Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quickie, and maybe being a little bit premature on this, maybe, but you know, Chair, Anne and myself fostered for in excess of 20 years, and our nightmare was finding facilities for the guys when we took them out. This is a huge step forward, amazing, and I hope this is just one and the beginning of something that might be mirrored elsewhere within tendering as a whole, because there's such a need for it. One, Chair, I'd like to publicly say thank you to the officers and those who put this together and have brought that before us tonight. I think it's been wonderful, and I'm just going to approve this, and that's it. Finished.
Thank you. And any other questions? Yes, Councillor Scott, and then Councillor Harris.
Yeah, I'd love to second Councillor Alexander, Maurice Alexander. I think it's absolutely fabulous. You know, it's very bright and colourful, and I love stripes as well. And the defib on this, Mr. John Pinkman pointed out at the site visit we probably have to relocate that elsewhere, perhaps attach it to this extension. I would like to have defibs on the other applications when they come forward, so it could be an idea to put defibs on the other 2, maybe. And I think it's crucially important for a district like ours where we have a lot of tourists, a lot of kids with their families and parents coming this way. And I think this will be an asset for Brighton Sea and an asset to the other areas as well. So I'm seconding Councillor Alexander before Councillor Harris gets in.
Thank you. I have one question, which is you mentioned funding. Whereabouts has the funding come from, please?
I don't know. It is not a planning matter that I would be involved in, and not a planning matter.
Just before Councillor Scott gets in on the next two, can I propose acceptance of the next two? Just to save a bit of time for everyone. Thank you. But if you can let me know about who the funding, I would be just for my own interest. I'd like to know which. Thank you.
Just before we take the vote, I like this coloured scheme, but I just wonder what the colours were. I think somebody suggested they were tendering districts colours, but I'm not sure of that.
The colours are not tendering district council colours, because we have one of those in my ward. They were called All Saints on the seafront. We have done for a while. It's absolutely lovely. And I absolutely approve 100%. And that it does look nice. And of course, the function of it, of course, is wonderful. There's pastel mix of colours. I think there's four colours. Yeah, am I right? Yes, 4 colours. Yeah, they're not shout out bright, but they're pastel mix and something like that. Yeah. Thank you, Chairman.
Good.
Chairman, sorry.
Just in answer to Councillor Harris's question, the funding came from the government, Department of Levelling Up, Housing and Communities.
Right, let's do a vote on that. Show of hands again, please. Those in favour of the proposal. That is unanimous. That one's approved. Can I ask Mr. Dupin to stop in his seat, and then we'll go to the seafront shelter of the Esplanade Holland, application 2201-675 full. And this one to John. Yeah.
So we went on site, we went down the hill to look at this one. This is just on the side. We saw the existing building that was going to be replaced. There would be a ramp to one side. And if I very quickly go through, it is a new building in this case, detached, and would, obviously you can see how thin the existing building is compared to obviously the width for this one, and that was discussed on site. And the proposal is as recommended for approval. Thank you.
Good. Over to Mr. Lepine if he's got anything to tell us over and above what we've got. No. All done. Yes, I should. He's not on the list, but the ward member should be a chance to speak.
Sorry, Chairman, I should say that Councillor Baker is the adjacent ward member for this one. It's in St Bartholomew's ward. It's the next one is the ward member for.
This will be very short. In fact, I'm not speaking as the adjacent ward councillor, although I am. I'm actually speaking as the member of the public, and I realise I've only got 3 minutes. I speak in favour of this, obviously, not as a ward councillor, but as a resident of Holland-on-Sea and as a member of the Holland Residents Association, who have agreed for me to speak on their behalf. This application is fully supported by not only the Holland Residents Association, but residents I've spoken to, and will be a great facility to have in the location you visited this morning. As you saw, there's a very nice cafe close by, and a 2 or 3 minute walk away, there is Holland Haven car park together with another toilet block. We're all very proud of our beaches. The ones you visited this morning are the best in the district. Has to be said that facilities for those people with disabilities, severe or otherwise, have not necessarily been well catered for. in all parts of the district. Now that will change. Everyone can now enjoy our beaches and sea, and having this facility in this location is ideal to enhance the experience that maybe was lacking previously. Hopefully by having this facility in this location, it will encourage those more disadvantaged than others to enjoy the best beaches in the district, as I've said. There was just something that obviously I can't ask because I'm sat here. There is a ramp, and it was asked by one of my colleagues on the HRA who is disabled, that there is enough room to go up the ramp in a disabled buggy and actually get into the actual facility itself. But that's just a comment, and maybe one of you can ask the question of the officers so we get a response. And I hope you will support it. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Scott.
Yeah, I like the previous one. I support this one also. Again, I asked the officer whether it's possible we can have a defib there, like in Brightonsea. I think we set a precedent because, you know, I'm not sure where the next defib is along there. It would be nice if we had a defib installed there, and maybe a waste bin nearby, because the old one doesn't have a waste bin there. It'd be a good idea if we had a waste bin next to the site. So I don't know whether the officer, I know the officer can't say now, talk now, but it might be something we can perhaps ask the planning department to speak to the other department to perhaps have a waste bin there and a defib. I'll move it if no one else has.
Thank you. Yeah. Straightforward vote. Those in favour, please show. Unanimous again. Thank you for that.
Chairman, if I may come in
And
now.
sorry, Gary wishes to comment. Yes.
Thank you. It's just a general reminder to the committee that we bring tendering district council applications before the committee, notwithstanding their size or significance, in the interest of transparency. And of course, although we may not necessarily have many members of the public here now, there are members of the public that will be listening online and will want to ensure that you've heard John's presentation and considered what he's had to say in making your decisions. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. So that was unanimously approved. And then the final one, still on the seafront in Clacton, Marine Parade East. Not as we found this morning at the end of Vista Avenue, but there we go. And I will ask John just to comment on this one.
Thank you, Chairman. So in respect of this one again, it is a similar proposal to the other two we've just seen. And obviously we went on site today, and it is located on the promenade to the beach, just down the bottom of the ramp opposite Marine Parade. It is hit before members, as it is owned by Tendring District Council. I'm just showing the application site. So go down the ramp, and it's at the point where you've got the vegetation between the upper ramp and the lower promenade. But of course, this will be dug in, so the access is out to the promenade. So it is flat. You don't have to climb a part of the verge to get there. So a few shots of the site. This is the point roughly where it's going to be gone, just in here. Like I said, it will be dug down, so cut away, not to allow access from the base. And again, needs flat roof design. Design obviously for disabled persons in mind, and has the cladding coloured, as you've seen on the previous applications. And that is the conclusion, and obviously the recommendation is one of approval again, in respect that we don't feel it does harm, and we recognise the benefits of the proposal.
Mr. Nepean, anything to add? No? Right. Local ward councillor?
I shall be very brief, Chairman. Obviously, I this application, I speak as a ward member. Since being elected last year in June 21, I've been advocating for a lot better access to our beaches and the sea for those with young children in pushchairs and those disabled and having to use a wheelchair. When the funding of £300,000 was announced, it will come as no surprise to learn I immediately pestered the relevant officers to make sure we got an application in, and at least one of the changing places toilets should be within my ward, and I'm glad to see that the applications has come forward. As you saw this morning, and as it's been described, the site is totally accessible. Another cafe nearby, as well as nearby access to the beach, and this facility, hopefully, and the others that you've approved already, is the beginning of TDC, or the continuing of TDC, making all our beaches accessible to those that are less fortunate than the rest of us. I hope you'll all support it. Thank you.
Do I have yes? Councillor Scott.
Before another councillor moves it this time, can I ask a question of Officer? I asked this on the site, and the gentleman there said yes, we'll have one. You know, the emergency pool calls. How do they work? I'm just saying, I know it goes to Caroline, but will the signal reach that far down on the beach? Just a matter of. I know the other ones are quite high up. I just wonder whether the emergency signal will get through if needs be.
I'm afraid I can't give you a conclusive answer to that. I only heard what you heard on site, which was that the signal, in the gentleman's opinion, would be suitable and able to get from that site. That area, I don't know if it's Wi-Fi, because certainly Wi-Fi and data signal and mobile phone signals all work fine on our beaches along here. So maybe it depends on the network, but there is obviously an emergency signal network as well available. So I can't exclusively tell you that particular issue. Unfortunately, I can only be the mean person here and say it's not a planning issue as such that I could give you advice on.
And I fully appreciate it's not a planning issue. It'd be nice if we could have the opportunity to ask the officer sitting in the public gallery, but obviously we can't. It's just something that if we're going to dig down instead of wrestling top, it may cause problems with signal. But I'm happy with the response we just given Mr. Payman G, and my phone doesn't work really well on the coast, I have to say. But other networks, there are other networks available.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sort of going to go along with Councillor Baker, the ward councillor. I don't think anyone on here has not campaigned long and hard over the years. And this is like fulfilling everything that we always wanted to do. We started it. Let's hope that we can move on with the officers' support and help and the finances to be able to do more throughout the whole of our district. But if anyone hasn't proposed this, then I would like to propose it, Chair, please.
No, second.
Take a vote. In that case, those in favour, please show. That is unanimous. Right, councillors, thank you very much. Been a long old do, hasn't it? But we've got there in the end. So our next official meeting will be Tuesday, the 20th of December. Mince pies, she says. Right, yes, possibly, yes. Now we wish our solicitor well. It only took her 3.5 hours to get here this evening, which traffic apparently was humongous in the pouring rain. So Hope she gets home safely. With that in mind, I close the meeting. Thank you very much.